Beneath the hum of forgotten whispers and the salt, stung air of a dying harbor, a secret waited, sealed in rust, silence, and history's blind spot. They said nothing valuable ever came from that auction, just dust, covered relics of another man's ruin. But when she lifted that crumpled naval, my pink faded, insignia scarred by time, something in the room changed. Every bidder fell silent, as if the past itself was holding its breath. She didn't know it yet, but for $500, Lena Corbett had just bought a doorway into the ocean's darkest secret, and the world's most dangerous treasure. After the last raindrops faded against the cracked windows of the old auction house, Lena Corbett felt the kind of silence that only comes before something extraordinary. The smell of dust and sea salt hung thick in the air, clinging to the peeling paint and warped wooden floors. Every item in the room, faded portraits, chipped compasses, moth-bitten uniforms, felt like a ghost waiting to be remembered. The crowd that had gathered was small, disinterested. A few locals hunched over their coats, eyes fixed on the catalogs in their laps. The auctioneer, an aging man with a voice like gravel dragged across tin, was nearly asleep at his own podium. Lot by lot, history was sold for the price of an evening meal. Lena sat near the back, hands clasped, her eyes scanning the forgotten relics with an archaeologist's hunger. She wasn't here for decoration or nostalgia. She was here because of a rumor. A whisper passed between collectors at the Maritime Museum about a naval record from the war, mislabeled and abandoned in some estate sale. She had followed less for less. When the auctioneer reached Lot 47, his voice cracked like a match in the gloom. Lot 47, he rasped, miscellaneous naval documents, no known origin, includes a rusted case and one partial map. Starting bid, $50. Nobody moved. A few people chuckled, as if the very idea of paying for corroded paper was absurd. The auctioneer sighed, wiping his brow with a stained handkerchief. 40, then, anyone, 30, Lena's pulse quickened. She could see the edge of the map from where she sat, rolled and tied with brittle string, a hint of faded ink glinting like a whisper of something forbidden. The lot number tag clung loosely to a corroded tin case beside it. Naval, unmistakably old. 20, the man muttered. Lena raised her hand. The auctioneer blinked, surprised to find any bidder at all. 20, to the lady in the back. 25, someone jeered from the side. A hobbyist, probably one of the locals who bid for sport. Lena didn't turn to look. 50, she said quietly. The man's smirk faltered. The auctioneer grinned for the first time that morning. $50. Do I hear 75? Silence. The hammer fell. Lena exhaled. The sound of that gavel was the sound of something beginning. She approached the table as the crowd shuffled out for lunch, their chatter echoing like gulls in an empty hall. Up close, the case looked even older than she'd imagined. Naval gray worn to a dull brown, rivets speckled with salt corrosion, the faint outline of an eagle insignia almost erased by time. She traced it with her thumb, feeling the rough edge of history. The map was another story. Carefully, she unrolled it on the table. The paper crackled under her fingertips. The ink bled with years of damp. Yet the markings were precise, coordinates, depth readings, a hand-drawn outline of a coastline that no longer matched any known charts. And there, faint but unmistakable, was the symbol of the Kriegsmarine. Her breath caught. Looks like junk to me. The auctioneer muttered, pocketing his cash. Lena smiled faintly. Junk is what built museums. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the distant cry of gulls and the low, restless groan of the sea. She stood for a moment under the cracked awning, rainwater dripping from its edge, the map pressed protectively to her chest. The world around her was small, ordinary, but the weight she felt wasn't. It was the weight of something buried deep, She walked to her truck parked along the harbor road, her boots splashing through shallow puddles. Fishing boats bobbed in the distance, their masts creaking like old bones. The town of Greyhaven was dying quietly, its docks rotting, its history forgotten. To everyone else, this was just another relic from another lost war. But to Lena, it was a door. The tin case rattled softly when she set it on the passenger seat. Inside, she could hear something metallic shifting, a sound too deliberate, too intentional to be coincidence. She tried the latch. Rust held it shut like an iron vow. She ran her fingers along the seam, feeling the grooves of time itself. Not yet. She whispered. She would open it when she was ready, when she knew where that map led. The rain intensified as she started the engine, wipers dragging back and forth like metronomes to the growing beat of her pulse. She turned onto the coastal road, the ocean stretching beside her, a grey mirror to her thoughts. Every archaeologist dreams of discovery, but discovery often comes with a price. Hours later, back at her small cottage by the sea, she spread the map out again under lamplight. Drops of rain from her coat dotted the parchment like new constellations. She found herself tracing the coordinates again and again. One in particular circled faintly in red ink. 61 degrees north, 4 degrees west, somewhere in the North Atlantic. She pulled out an old maritime atlas, aligning the grid lines. The location fell near an uncharted depression, deep water, cold and remote. Too remote for shipping routes, too deep for salvage. A graveyard of metal and memory. Lena leaned back in her chair, the lamplight flickering over her tired eyes. "Why there?" she murmured. The question echoed through her like an undertow. She remembered stories her grandfather used to tell of you, boats that disappeared without trace, of gold smuggled through the seas to fuel a dying empire. Fairy tales, he'd said, but fairy tales had roots in truth. She poured herself a cup of cold coffee, staring out the window at the restless sea. Beyond the glass, the horizon was swallowing the last traces of light. For a moment, she thought she saw something, a flicker, a shape beneath the surface, gone as soon as it appeared. The sea doesn't give up its secrets easily. She returned to the map, her hand hovering over the insignia again. The Reich eagle, wings spread, talons clutching nothing but absence. It felt less like a symbol now and more like a warning. In the corner of the parchment, almost invisible under layers of age, was a set of faintly penciled words in German. She tilted the lamp, deciphering each curve, each stroke. The ink had almost faded completely, but the phrase was still legible enough to chill her blood. Vergessen ist nicht verloren. Forgotten is not lost. The wind outside howled through the chimney, low and mournful. Lena folded the map carefully, slipping it back into the tin case. She locked it in her trunk with the precision of ritual. There was no doubt left now. Whatever waited at those coordinates wasn't just debris. It was something deliberately hidden, something meant to stay that way. As she stood in the doorway, the night pressing against the glass, she felt the same hum she'd felt in the auction hall. A tremor of fate aligning, invisible and unstoppable. The world outside was dark, but her mind was alive, spinning with the possibilities of what lay beneath the waves. And in that quiet, in that electric stillness, Lena Corbett understood one truth that would change everything. Sometimes the greatest discoveries are the ones the world has tried hardest to bury. The ocean roared somewhere beyond the cliffs, a sound that felt less like nature and more like memory calling her name. As the lamplight dimmed and the map's shadow stretched long across the table, Lena whispered into the darkness, half to herself, half to the ghost she had unknowingly awakened, "I'm coming." The night swallowed her words whole, carrying them out to sea like a promise. And somewhere far below, unseen in the deep, something stirred. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. Morning broke pale and uncertain, light creeping slowly across Lena's cottage walls like a hesitant confession. The sea outside was calmer now, as if pretending innocence after whispering too many secrets in the dark. She hadn't slept. Her mind kept drifting back to the coordinates, to the way the map seemed almost alive under her hands, humming with memory. Coffee steamed beside her, untouched. The table was cluttered with open notebooks, old maritime charts, and her laptop glowing faintly in the dawn light. She zoomed in on the digital maps, cross-checking the location again. Nothing marked, no wreck reports, no naval records. Just an empty patch of ocean, colder and deeper than most vessels dared venture. Lena leaned closer to the screen. "Why would someone mark this?" she murmured. She pulled out the tin case again. The latch resisted, rust fused like scar tissue, but she worked at it with a flathead screwdriver, careful, patient. The metal groaned before finally surrendering with a crack that echoed through the quiet room. Inside lay layers of folded paper, brittle as autumn leaves, and beneath them, something heavier. She brushed away the dust, revealing a compact, corroded metal tag with a stamped serial number. Naval identification. German, unmistakably wartime. Her breath hitched. She turned it over and froze. Scratched into the back, barely visible under corrosion, were initials. K, M, and a date, 1945. Her fingers trembled. 1945. The year everything ended. The year the world tried to forget what it had done. She unfolded the papers next. Handwritten manifests, cargo logs, and a partial crew list. Names, ranks, notes. The writing was cramped, efficient, but one line stood out near the bottom, circled in faded red pencil. Transport. Conscutor/Priority Clearance Order 772. Art Goods. Priority Transport. She whispered the words as if saying them aloud would make them real. They were moving stolen art. The implications rippled through her, like a storm building beneath calm seas. Every historian had heard rumors of Nazi gold, lost trains, hidden caches beneath mountains or sunken ships. But rumors rarely left evidence behind. This was different. This was a breadcrumb trail buried in plain sight. Her pulse quickened. She reached for a camera, snapping photographs of the documents before carefully sealing them back in the case. Then she dialed a number she hadn't used in months. Lena Corbett. Came the groggy voice on the other end. "Paul, it's me," she said quickly. "I need a sonar scan. Deep North Atlantic. Coordinates incoming." There was a pause. "That's not a survey zone. What are you chasing now?" "Something old," she said. "And valuable. Maybe both kinds of valuable." He sighed, the kind of sigh that carried both concern and curiosity. "Send the data. I'll patch you into the next dive rotation if the depth's feasible. But Lena, be careful. The last time you said valuable, you nearly drowned off Malta." "I'm still here," she said softly. "That has to mean something." When she hung up, the morning had already turned to steel, gray. Clouds crawled over the horizon like gathering thoughts. She stepped outside, the wind tugging at her hair, the sea restless again. The gulls circled low, crying over something unseen. She stood at the edge of the cliff, watching the waves break and reform endlessly. For a moment, she could almost imagine what lay beneath. The vast, cold silence of the Atlantic, layers of time preserved in darkness. Somewhere down there was a story that refused to die. As the hours passed, she prepared for the journey with quiet determination. Her gear cases lined the walls, diving suits, oxygen tanks, sonar tablets, waterproof drones. It wasn't the first time she'd chased ghosts beneath the waves, but something about this felt heavier, more intimate. This wasn't just a hunt for history, it was a summons. By afternoon, she'd confirmed the coordinates again. Depth, 300 meters, beyond the reach of most salvage operations, but not impossible with the right submersible. She knew the risks, pressure, cold, the unseen dangers of the deep, but she also knew herself. Curiosity was her compass, and it always pointed toward the impossible. She spent the evening studying the crew manifest again. One name kept catching her eye: Capitan Lieutenant Marcus Felt. The initials matched the tag. She searched the archives for hours, but the name didn't appear in any official naval record. It was as if he'd been erased. And then, as the last light faded, she found something. A mention buried in a declassified British intelligence memo. Intercepted transmission, April 1945. Vessel of unknown designation. Possible cargo. Cultural assets. Departure from Bergen. Presumed lost. Her hand tightened around the mouse. Bergen, Norway. The same coastline marked faintly on her map. The pieces began to connect, slowly, inevitably. She whispered the coordinates again under her breath, as if committing them to memory was a kind of vow. 61 degrees north, 4 degrees west. She closed her laptop, the screen's glow fading into the dusk. Outside, the tide had risen high against the rocks. She could hear it breathing like something alive. That night, Lena packed her equipment in silence. The house filled with the muted clatter of metal and canvas, the rhythm of someone preparing for a reckoning. She sealed the tin case inside a waterproof container, double-checked the map's coordinates, and left a note on her desk. If I don't return, the truth is buried here. But the truth wasn't buried, not yet. As the wind howled and the sea called her name, Lena felt a strange calm settle in her chest. She had always believed that history wasn't dead. It merely waited for someone stubborn enough to listen. And tonight, she would start listening. Before dawn, she loaded her gear into the truck. The engine rumbled to life, headlights cutting through the mist. She drove down the narrow coastal road, cliffs on one side, the endless Black Sea on the other. Every turn felt like descending into another world. At the harbor, a few fishermen lingered by their boats, smoking in silence. They watched her with quiet curiosity as she backed her vehicle toward the dock. The air smelled of salt and oil and secrets. Paul was waiting near the end of the pier, a tall man with wind-bitten skin and weary eyes. "You weren't kidding," he said, glancing at the map. "That's not just deep, Lena, it's suicidal." "Then it's worth it," she replied. He exhaled slowly. "I'll get the sub ready. We sail tomorrow at dawn." As he walked away, Lena looked out over the dark horizon. The waves rolled slow and heavy, carrying whispers from a time when the world was at war with itself. She tightened her jacket, the chill biting through her resolve. The rusted case rested in her hands, its weight both anchor and invitation. Somewhere beneath those waters lay the answer to a question no one had dared ask in 80 years. She whispered to the wind, to the ghosts, to the memory of every lost name written on that fragile map. "Show me what they tried to hide." The sea offered no reply, only the deep, steady rhythm of something ancient waiting to be found. And as the night folded around her, Lena Corbett knew there was no turning back. Tomorrow, she would follow those coordinates into the silence. Tomorrow, the ocean would tell its story, and she would listen. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. After the long night of preparation, dawn broke like a pale secret over the harbor. Mist clung to the water in ghostly layers, muffling the world into shades of silver and blue. Lena stood at the edge of the pier, watching as the research vessel Astrius stirred to life. The sound of engines rumbled beneath her feet, a low, steady heartbeat promising both discovery and danger. She hadn't slept again, but fatigue only sharpened her senses. Everything she touched, everything she saw, carried that electric charge of the unknown. This wasn't just another expedition. This was history calling from the bottom of the sea. Paul's voice broke the hum of machinery, coordinates locked, depth charts clear enough to dive once we reach grid zero. Lena nodded, tucking a strand of wind, tossed hair behind her ear, and the submersible, primed, Nereid Roman II's ready for her maiden plunge. The name made her smile faintly. In Greek myth, the Nereids were daughters of the sea, guides, protectors, sometimes destroyers. She hoped this one would be kind. The crew moved with quiet efficiency. 3 divers, 2 engineers, and Lena's small research team. Each carried the subdued excitement of professionals standing at the edge of discovery. As the ropes were untied and the vessel pushed away from the dock, the town of Greyhaven faded into mist, its silence swallowed by the open sea. For hours they sailed north, cutting through the Atlantic's cold skin. The waves grew darker, denser, carrying the weight of forgotten wars. Lena stood at the bow, her eyes fixed on the horizon as the wind whipped against her face. The coordinates pulsed in her mind like a heartbeat. 61 degrees north, 4 degrees west. By midday, they reached the grid zone. The sonar began its slow, rhythmic pinging, sending invisible ripples through the abyss. Each return signal painted a faint outline of the ocean floor. Barren stretches of silt, ridges shaped by centuries of current. Then, something appeared, a shape, not natural. Lena leaned over the monitor. Hold scan. The sonar operator froze the feed. There, in the grainy blue outlines, a silhouette stretched across the seafloor. Long, narrow, and unmistakably man-made. Jesus, Paul whispered, that's a hull. Lena's heart skipped. Mark it. The crew moved in coordinated silence, marking the coordinates, adjusting the course. Within minutes, Astrius hovered directly above the target point. The sea below was a flat mirror, concealing what lay beneath. Lena suited up. The submersible gleamed under the pale skies, more spherical, built for deep pressure and silence. Its reinforced glass viewport stared like an unblinking eye into the unknown. She stepped inside, feeling the hum of systems power up around her. Paul's voice came through the headset. Telemetry is green. Once you're past 2,000 meters, comms might get patchy. Keep the lights low to reduce reflection. Lena secured her harness. Copy that. The hatch sealed shut. The Nereid Roman II began its descent. At first, there was only light. The soft gradient of blue, the shimmer of sunlight playing on rippling waves. But as the sub sank, the colors dimmed, fading into deeper hues. Blue turned to indigo, indigo to black. The world outside the viewport became a vast cathedral of nothingness. Lena watched, mesmerized. Particles of plankton drifted past like falling stars, each one glowing faintly in the sub's searchlights. The sound of the ocean pressed against the hull low, endless, ancient. At 3,000 meters, the lights of the surface vanished entirely. The sub's instruments glowed like fireflies in the dark. Lena's voice came soft through the static. Passing 3000, pressure steady. Copy that, Paul replied faintly. You're alone down there now, Lena. She smiled without answering. The isolation wasn't fear, it was purity. The kind of silence where truth could finally speak. At 200 meters, the sonar beeped sharply. Something massive loomed ahead. She switched on the floodlights. The darkness peeled back slowly, like a curtain lifting on a forgotten stage. And there it was. The submarine, buried in the seabed, half wallowed by coral and time. Its metal skin glinted under centuries of salt and silence. The bow tilted upward, as though the vessel had tried to rise before surrendering forever. Its insignia, a faint eagle, wings outstretched, was still visible on the corroded hull. Lena's breath caught. I found it, she whispered. For a moment the calm line crackled, silent except for the hum of systems. Then Paul's voice came, thick with disbelief. "Repeat that." "It's here, Paul. The wreck is intact." Static swallowed his reply, but Lena didn't need to hear it. Every part of her being was tuned to what lay before her. She circled the wreck slowly, floodlights sweeping across its surface. Fish scattered into darkness as her sub passed over the skeletal outline of the conning tower, the shattered periscope, the open torpedo hatches. Time had eaten away at the edges, but the core of the vessel remained, sealed, silent, whole. It felt like trespassing in a cathedral built for ghosts. She hovered the sub closer, studying the seams, the entry points, the faint glimmer of metal preserved under silt. The nameplate was almost gone, but she could make out fragments of letters, U4, and then nothing. She whispered the missing numbers under her breath, filling them in from instinct. U-492. The floodlights flickered, catching on something strange near the stern. A shape out of place, smooth, angular, not coral, not rock. She inched closer. It was a crate, wedged against the hull, entombed in marine growth. The same dimensions, the same structure as the tin case she'd found in the auction. Her pulse quickened. There's cargo, external. She reached for the manipulator arm, brushing away layers of sand and coral. Symbols emerged, faded but unmistakable. The Reich eagle again, clutching the same circle of nothingness. Vergessen ist nicht verloren. She whispered. Forgotten is not lost. Her hands shook slightly as she took the first photographs. Every historian dreams of uncovering a relic. Few ever realize they've uncovered a secret instead. Then something shifted in the dark, not sound, pressure, a subtle change in the surrounding water, like a breath drawn by something unseen. The sonar blipped irregularly, as though something large was moving just beyond the floodlight's reach. Lena froze. Paul, do you read? Static. The sonar blipped again, closer this time. She turned the sub's camera toward the disturbance. For a moment, nothing. Then, a slow swirl of silt rose from the seabed, drifting like smoke through the beam. It wasn't movement, it was release. The submarine was settling. Metal groaned deep below, a haunting echo carried through the water. The wreck shifted slightly, sending clouds of debris spiraling upward. The sea stirred as if the ship itself exhaled after decades of silence. Lena steadied the sub, eyes wide. It's alive. The phrase wasn't literal, but it felt true. The vessel didn't feel dead. It felt waiting. She hovered there in awe, lights dimming slightly to conserve power. Her reflection stared back from the glass, small and fragile against the enormity of history's shadow. And then, through the swirling silt, something caught the light. A glimpse, more deliberate, buried near the forward hatch. She zoomed in, a handle, still intact, still sealed. Lena's heartbeat roared in her ears. She reached for the camera, snapping photo after photo. Then she whispered into the static, though no one could hear her anymore. I've found the entrance. The floodlight flickered once more, as if the sea itself blinked, and somewhere, deep in the darkness, a sound answered, a low, metallic creak, too slow, too deliberate to be chance. Lena froze, the air inside the sub suddenly thinner. It wasn't just the wreck shifting. Something inside had moved. As the abyss pressed closer around her, she realized she had only begun to disturb its silence. The sound echoed again, low, metallic, and impossibly human. It wasn't the random settling of a wreck. It was rhythm, intention, like something deep inside the submarine was responding to her presence. Lena sat motionless in the dark, one hand gripping the console, her breath shallow and misting against the glass. The Nereid Roman II hung in silence, lights dimmed to amber. Outside the viewport, the world was liquid black. The ocean pressed in like a living thing, shifting, breathing, ancient. Lena forced herself to listen. The only sound inside was her own pulse, steady, fast, relentless. "Paul," she whispered, though she knew the comms had long faded to static. "If you can hear me, I think I've woken something." Her hand trembled over the control stick, easing the sub closer to the submarine's hull. The floodlights brushed over the corroded metal, revealing details time had hidden. A row of bullet scars across the side plating, the faint remnants of barnacle, covered numbers, the eerie gleam of a shattered viewing window where darkness pooled inside like ink. She could feel it now, the weight of history pressing not only on the hull, but on her chest. The deeper she looked, the less it felt like discovery and more like intrusion. Yet curiosity overpowered fear. It always had. She switched on the robotic arm and extended it toward the sealed hatch. The hydraulic joints creaked softly in the water. As the claw touched the metal, a flake of rust drifted upward and disintegrated into 1,000 specks of memory. Then, without warning, something slid free, a plaque dislodged from the upper edge of the hatch. It spun slowly in front of the glass. Lena's light caught the engraving. Kriegsmarine Sonderauftrag 772. Special Mission 772. Her breath hitched. She'd seen that number before. In the case, scribbled beside the words Conscutor. The connection was no longer theory. This was the ship that carried the lost cargo. But the questions came faster than her pulse. Why had it sunk? Why here, in an uncharted depression? And if this was a secret transport, why was the hull so intact? The floodlight glared off a patch of metal near the entrance. She leaned closer, squinting. The steel around the hatch wasn't warped outward, as it should have been from an explosion. It was pulled inward, like something had forced its way in. Her throat tightened. The robotic arm drifted over the entry again, brushing silt aside until the hatch handle came fully into view, rose in mid-motion, as if someone had tried to open it at the last possible moment. The edges of the metal were scratched in desperate arcs. Lena whispered to the dark, "What were you running from?" A whisper of static answered through the calm. Just for an instant, faint, fragmented, then silence again. The sea outside shuddered with the distant roar of a current. Particles spun in lazy spirals, catching the sub's faint glow. For a moment, it looked as if the wreck itself exhaled again, a slow release of ancient air escaping from cracks too small to see. Her instruments flickered, pressure reading steady, temperature drop 2 degrees. Something cold was moving through the water. She adjusted the lights, panning across the sand around the submarine. Scattered debris, small and unremarkable, metal fragments, torn cables, unidentifiable lumps swallowed by coral. But then she saw it, a boot. Lena froze. The leather was preserved by the depth, blackened and rigid, half buried in the silt. A skeleton's ankle bone protruded from the cuff, white and ghostly. She stared, unable to move. Human remains. For a long moment, she forgot to breathe. The sea, the wreck, the silence, all of it closed around her in a single heartbeat. This wasn't just a shipwreck, it was a tomb. She reached for her camera again, her hands shaking, taking careful shots of the scene. As the flash flickered, another shape caught her eye beyond the debris field. A helmet, dented, marked with a single line of red paint still faintly visible through the decay. It wasn't a German issue. It was British. 2 nations, 1 wreck. Whatever happened here wasn't a simple sinking. It was a battle, a chase, or something worse. Lena swallowed hard and steadied the sub. The light swept back toward the submarine's hull, and this time she saw it. Letters etched faintly into the metal, just below the conning tower hand. Scratched, uneven. Vergebung, forgiveness. Her breath caught. The word was carved, not stamped. Message left by a human hand, not machinery. It wasn't an emblem of victory, it was a confession. The weight of it sank through her like cold water. What had they done down here? What had they tried to atone for before the sea took them? The calm crackled suddenly, pulling her from her trance. "Nah, you, copy." Paul's voice, broken but real. "I hear you," she said quickly. "Signal's weak, but I'm here." "Lena, you're pushing the pressure limit. Get ready to ascend." She hesitated, staring at the hull one last time. Every instinct screamed to stay, to see more, to know more. But logic whispered louder now. The creaks of the wreck, the unpredictable pressure shifts. One wrong move could collapse the hull and bury her forever beside the ghosts she was chasing. "Copy that?" she said softly, initiating ascent. The sub's thrusters hummed, lifting her slowly from the seabed. The floodlight swept across the submarine one final time, and in that brief, flickering moment, she could swear she saw movement inside the shattered viewport. A trick of the light, maybe, or her imagination carving shapes out of shadows. But she felt it, watching her. As the narrate Roman 2 rose, the outline of the submarine faded into the blue-black abyss, swallowed again by centuries of silence. The sonar pinged softly, steady, rhythmic, like the pulse of something ancient falling back to sleep. At 2,000 meters, the light began to return, faint at first, then gradually stronger. The ocean shifted from black to indigo, indigo to blue, until finally, the surface shimmered above like a broken mirror. Lena exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Her reflection floated ghost-like in the glass, pale, white, died alive. The moment the sub broke the surface, the world exploded with sound. The hiss of waves, the shouts of the crew, the crackle of wind through the speakers. Paul's voice filled her headset, tight with relief. "Welcome back, Corbett. We thought we'd lost you." Lena smiled weakly, the adrenaline still burning in her veins. "You almost did." The recovery arm lifted the sub onto the deck with a groan of steel. Crew members rushed forward, pulling open the hatch. Fresh air hit her like a slap. She climbed out, legs unsteady, the roar of the ocean deafening after the stillness below. Paul met her at the platform, eyes wide. "What did you see?" She looked out at the waves, unable to find words. Finally, she said quietly, "A graveyard that still remembers." He frowned, unsure how to respond, but Lena didn't elaborate. Instead, she placed her hand over her chest, feeling the steady thrum of her heart, a small echo of that endless, patient silence below. She knew what she'd seen wasn't just wreckage. It was a story buried beneath layers of guilt, faith, and something close to redemption. The message etched on that whole forgiveness wasn't just for the dead. It was a message meant to be found. As dusk settled over the Atlantic, Astrius turned toward shore. The sky burned in streaks of crimson and violet, the waves shimmering with dying light. Lena stood alone at the stern, wind cold against her face, mind still trapped somewhere 4,000 meters below. In the corner of her cabin, the tin case waited, its lock untouched, its secret still sealed. She sat before it, fingers hovering over the latch, feeling the weight of everything she'd seen pressed down like the ocean itself. The voices of the past were louder now, not in words, but in presence. And in the rhythm of the ship's engine, she could almost hear the echo again, the sound of metal groaning in the dark, the whisper of something waiting to be remembered. She whispered back, not out of fear, but reverence. "I'll come back for you." Outside, the sea stretched endless and calm, hiding its truth beneath the stars. And as night deepened over the Atlantic, Lena Corbett realized that what she had found wasn't the end of a mystery. It was the beginning of a confession too heavy for history to carry alone. As the night deepened, she realized the story was only beginning. The ocean was calm the next morning, too calm, as if the sea itself was pretending nothing had happened. The Astrius drifted above the same coordinates, its hull creaking gently under the push of the current. But below, 4,000 meters beneath their feet, the wreck waited, silent, patient, alive in a way Lena could no longer ignore. She hadn't slept. Her dreams had been filled with fragments of sound, metal groaning, water rushing through corridors, whispers she couldn't translate. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that word carved into the submarine's hull, Vergibung, forgiveness. Now, standing at the edge of the deck with the cold wind pressing against her skin, she knew she couldn't leave it untouched. Not when the hatch had been so deliberately sealed. Not when every instinct told her it was hiding something the world wasn't meant to forget. Paul's voice broke through her thoughts. "You really want to go back down there today?" Lena turned. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, salt-crusted in his beard. The rest of the crew shared the same expression. The sea took energy in invisible ways, draining it like a tide. "We don't have a choice," she said quietly. "The wreck's intact, and that hatch, it's not just a relic, it's a door." He frowned, "And doors like that are usually locked for a reason." Lena didn't argue. She just looked back at the horizon, where the sunlight fractured into silver shards across the waves. History locks things away too, doesn't mean we should let it. By mid-morning, preparations were underway. Nereid Roman 2 was refitted, sensors recalibrated, mechanical arms greased and primed. The mood was different this time, not excitement, but reverence. The first dive had been discovery. This one felt like intrusion. Lena checked her equipment herself, oxygen systems, battery reserves, camera lenses. She moved with ritual precision, every click and seal echoing like a vow. The crew gave her space, they could feel it too. Whatever called from below, it wasn't done speaking. When the submersible lowered again, the ocean swallowed her without ceremony. The descent was faster now, the route familiar, the fear different. It wasn't the unknown that haunted her. It was the sense that something down there already knew she was coming. At 4.00 meters, the lights of the surface were gone. The abyss welcomed her back with open silence. She reached the wreck. The submarine lay exactly where she'd left it, half buried in the silt, the conning tower leaning at a slight angle like a monument to failed courage. The word Vergibung was still there, faint in her floodlight's glow, a ghost carved into iron. But this time she didn't stop to stare. Approaching forward hatch, she said into the calm, though she knew the signal would fade any moment, preparing for contact. The robotic arms reached out again, brushing away the layer of sand and decay around the entrance. The handle gleamed faintly, impossibly intact despite the years. It was strange, almost deliberate, as if the ocean itself had spared this single piece. She rotated the sub, positioning the manipulator tool at the hatch's locking wheel. Her pulse thudded against her throat. "Let's see what you're hiding." The wheel resisted at first, stiff and rusted. She applied pressure, and a dull groan filled the water, a sound so deep it vibrated through the hull of her sub. She held her breath as it turned, millimeter by millimeter, until suddenly it moved freely. The lock released. A cloud of silt erupted outward, swirling into a slow golden storm in her floodlights. Lena's heartbeat quickened. She adjusted the thrusters, holding her position steady. The door didn't open completely. It hung slightly ajar, as if waiting for permission. Pressure equalized through the gap, releasing a stream of trapped air bubbles that spiraled upward like lost souls fleeing their cage. Lena stared through the small opening. Darkness stared back. Her voice came low, reverent. After 80 years, it still sealed tight. The air that escaped was old ancient, and when it brushed against the sensors, they flickered. Chemical readings spiked briefly, then steadied again. Whatever atmosphere was inside that submarine had been preserved. Lena's mind raced. It shouldn't have been possible. The interior air should have been consumed, replaced by seawater decades ago. But it wasn't, which meant the inside of that ship had survived untouched. She extended a camera probe into the gap, its red light slicing through the void. The image flickered to life on her screen. Her breath caught. The interior wasn't flooded. The corridor beyond the hatch stretched inward, lined with rusted pipes and faded insignia, but dry, eerily dry. A fine mist floated through the air like memory, glinting against the beam of the camera. Impossible. She adjusted the angle. The camera panned slowly down the corridor until it stopped on a door halfway along the passage. A handprint, blackened, burned, was smeared across it. Lena's throat tightened. "Paul, are you getting this?" Only static answered. She switched to data record mode, heart pounding. The air inside that vessel might hold clues. Chemical traces, biological evidence. Anything to explain how a sealed submarine survived intact for so long. She drew the probe back and stared at the hatch. Part of her knew she shouldn't push further. Every instinct as a scientist said stop, study, return later with proper equipment. But curiosity was older than reason. And something in that darkness was calling. She took a long breath and activated the mechanical clamps. The sub's arm gripped the edge of the hatch and pulled. The sound was deep, resonant, the sound of metal surrendering. The hatch swung open slowly, releasing a wave of ancient air into the sea. It shimmered like oil in her floodlight, bubbles rising like a chorus of sighs. The camera fed static for a few seconds, then cleared. A hallway stretched before her, ending in black. Objects floated weightless in the zero gravity of the sealed space. Papers, a boot, a pen, frozen in place as if time itself had stopped mid-breath. Lena whispered, "Oh my God." The silence felt heavier now. Holy. She drifted closer, the sub's nose aligning perfectly with the entrance. She could see the faint outlines of bunks inside, a table still bolted to the floor, a broken lantern hanging upside down. The ship had died in the middle of a moment, and somehow that moment had lasted 80 years. The floodlight flickered again. For half a second she saw movement, a shift, a trick of shadow. She froze. "Hello," she whispered instinctively. No response. Only the slow, rhythmic pulse of sonar echoing faintly through the abyss. But then, faintly, from deep within the corridor, something moved again. Not falling debris. Not water displacement. A shape, slow, human-sized. Her camera feed glitched, static crawling across the image. "Paul," she said, her voice shaking, "there's something inside." The comm line hissed, a single word barely audible through the distortion surface. Now, Lena didn't move. She couldn't. Her eyes were locked on the image, frozen between awe and terror. The figure, whatever it was, stood just beyond the reach of the floodlight, its outline faint against the corridor's darkness. And then it was gone. The image cleared. The hallway was empty again. Lena sat in silence, every breath loud in her helmet. She knew what fear felt like, real fear, the kind that makes the world narrow into a single heartbeat. But this wasn't fear. This was something older, a warning. The hatch gaped open now, its edges trembling slightly under the shifting current. The sub's lights dimmed one last time, flickering across the letters near the hatch rim. Letters she hadn't noticed before, engraved so faintly that they only appeared under the perfect angle of her beam. "Komm nicht hierin. Do not enter." The words rippled through her bones like a cold current. And for the first time, Lena Corbett wished she had listened. As the sea settled into silence once more, she knew she had crossed a line that could never be closed again. The hatch hung open behind her sub like a wound in the ocean's skin, dark, pulsing, breathing faintly in the light. The words etched into its rim still echoed in her mind, "Komm nicht hierin, do not enter." But she had already crossed the line. The Nereid Roman II drifted closer. the mechanical arm retracting as Lena nudged the sub's nose through the narrow opening. The steel edges scraped against the hull with a sound that felt too much like a whisper. The lights illuminated the corridor beyond, surreal, suspended, impossibly dry. It was like diving into time itself. Papers floated midair, not falling, not rising, just hovering, weightless. Dust particles glittered like stars in her beam. Every surface was draped in a thin sheen of crystallized salt, as if the air inside had aged into glass. Her voice came soft, reverent, "I'm inside." No response. The calm link was dead again. Only the hum of the sub's systems remained, steady but faint beneath the oppressive quiet. Lena angled the sub forward, her camera panning across the walls. The first room she reached looked like an operations bay. Switches and levers covered in frost, gauges frozen mid-measure. A typewriter bolted to the table with a yellowed sheet of paper still rolled into it. She zoomed in German words typed unevenly, the ink faded but legible enough to send a chill through her. "Es darf niemals gefunden werden." It must never be found. She exhaled slowly, every part of her body tightening. Beyond the console, a small photo was taped to the bulkhead. It showed a crew, young men in uniform, smiling. Their faces were blurred with decay, but she could see one clearly, a man with sharp eyes and a calm expression. Beneath it, a name was written in neat script. Kapitänleutnant Marcus Felt, the same name from the documents, the same initials carved into the ID tag. He had been here, and somehow she could still feel him. Lena turned the sub slightly, aiming the floodlight toward the back of the room. More objects floated in the stale air. Dog tags, empty bottles, a half-open locker. Inside, the remains of a uniform drifted, sleeve torn, insignia rusted. But what caught her attention was the small wooden box nestled in the corner, perfectly preserved. Her camera zoomed closer. The box was marked with a black seal, an eagle clutching a circle, identical to the symbol she'd seen on the tin case from the auction. This wasn't just another submarine, this was the source. Her hand trembled on the control stick. "There's something here," she whispered, though she knew no one could hear, "something they died to protect." She extended the manipulator arm, gently brushing the box. It didn't move. It was tethered to the wall by a rusted chain, locked shut. She rotated the view to capture its details, every corner, every marking, and then, faintly, from somewhere deeper inside the vessel, came a sound. A knock, soft, deliberate. Lena froze. The sound echoed through the corridor, low and muffled, vibrating through the steel like a heartbeat. Once, then silence. She waited. Another knock, closer this time. Her pulse pounded in her throat. "Paul," she said instinctively, though she knew the comms were dead. Her voice was swallowed by static. The floodlight flickered. Something moved at the edge of the frame, a shadow slipping past the doorway at the far end of the corridor. She swung the camera toward it, but there was nothing there now, just the emptiness of a dead ship. The sub's oxygen gauge dipped slightly. The temperature inside her cabin dropped by 2 degrees. Condensation formed along the glass of her viewport. She whispered to herself, "Stay calm, just stay calm." The silence felt alive now, humming faintly in her ears. It wasn't just quiet, it was pressure, presence, as if the walls remembered what had happened and were straining to tell her. She maneuvered deeper into the vessel, past the operations bay and into the crew quarters. The space was smaller, more confined. Bunks lined both sides, sheets stiff with time. A journal floated above one of the pillows, its pages flickering gently as though disturbed by invisible hands. Lena's floodlight found the first words, handwritten, smudged. "They told us it was gold, but this is something else, something cursed." She felt her skin prickle. The next line was worse. The captain says we must seal it forever, that the sea will keep our secret. Her throat went dry. She knew what they were talking about, the crate, the one sealed to the wall, the same crate whose twin she'd seen inside the auction case. Whatever these men had carried wasn't treasure, it was a burden. She scanned further down the corridor. Another door loomed ahead, larger, sealed with heavy bolts. Letters painted faintly across the metal spelled Lageram, storage room. Lena hesitated. The part of her that was scientist wanted to open it. The part of her that was human wanted to flee. The sub's camera crept closer anyway. A faint light flickered beneath the crack in the door. Not white, not mechanical, but pale and shifting, like phosphorescence moving underwater. The floodlight dimmed for a moment, reacting to interference. Then came another sound, not a knock this time, a voice, barely a whisper, carried through layers of metal and time. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was pleading, urgent. A man's voice, distant but unmistakable. Her breath hitched. "Who's there?" The voice answered, softer, fading, Vergibung. Forgiveness. Her stomach turned cold. The sub's instruments flared briefly, static crawling across every monitor. Power dipped, then recovered. The air inside her cabin felt thicker, as if the very sea had leaned closer to listen. Something shifted inside the wreck. A metallic groan, long and low, rising like a sigh from the ship's bones. The corridor filled with drifting silt, swirling like smoke. Lena pulled back the controls. "I'm leaving," she whispered, though her voice trembled with something that wasn't fear anymore. It was sorrow. She reversed thrusters, guiding the sub back toward the hatch. The corridor stretched endlessly now, distorted by the haze. Papers brushed against the glass, faces from old photographs pressed for an instant before drifting away. When she finally reached the hatch, she hesitated. She looked back once. The storage door at the far end Lageram was open. She hadn't opened it. The light inside pulsed once, faint and slow, like the last heartbeat of a dying star. Her breath caught and then it went dark. Lena slammed the controls, propelling the Nereid Roman 2 out through the hatch and into the open ocean. The current surged around her, carrying the sub upward in violent bursts. The sonar screamed with interference, readings spiking and vanishing as though the sea itself was scrambling her escape. "Surface," she cried, even though the comms were dead. Surface now. The pressure increased, alarms blaring. The lights flickered red. She fought the controls with both hands, muscles burning. For a moment the entire ocean seemed to pull her back down, but then, light. The sub broke the surface, bursting into the grey daylight like a creature reborn. She gasped for air. Tears she hadn't realized she was crying streaking down her face. Through the fog, the Astrius loomed ahead. The crew was shouting, their voices distorted through the headset. She couldn't hear the words, only the fear in them. Paul's voice finally broke through. "Lena, what the hell happened down there?" She stared at the water, the ripples widening from where she'd emerged. For a long time, she couldn't speak. The ocean looked calm again, as if nothing had happened. Finally, she whispered it wasn't empty. Paul froze. "What do you mean?" Her eyes never left the water. Something was waiting. A long silence followed. Only the wind answered, howling through the rigging. Lena climbed out of the sub, her legs trembling, her heart still racing with the rhythm of the abyss. She looked back toward the coordinates where the submarine lay, 4,000 meters below, sealed again by the sea. She thought of the hatch, the message, the voice, and as the sky darkened above the Atlantic, she realized that the ocean hadn't given her a discovery, it had given her a warning. Whatever slept beneath that hatch should have stayed buried. As the storm gathered on the horizon, Lena felt the weight of the deep follow her home. whispering a truth she was not yet ready to hear. The sea had changed. It no longer felt like water, but something heavier, something that watched. Even on the surface, the Atlantic seemed alive in ways Lena could no longer explain. The waves didn't move randomly anymore. They pulsed, as if echoing the slow heartbeat of something buried far below. The Astrius cut through fog that hung like breath over the waves. The storm from the night before had passed, but it had left behind a silence too thick to be real. Even the gulls were gone. Lena stood on deck, hair plastered to her face, eyes locked on the horizon. Behind her, the crew moved in hushed tones. They avoided her now, not out of blame but fear. Whatever she had brought back from the depths, it clung to her like salt on skin. Paul broke the quiet. "We're heading back to shore." No arguments this time. Lena didn't answer. She kept staring east, where the sun struggled through layers of cloud. She could still feel the pulse of the ocean under her boots, the faint tremor that never stopped. Paul stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've done enough, Lena. You found it. You proved the rumors were real. But what's down there?" She turned to him sharply. "You didn't see what I saw." He hesitated. "You're right, and I don't want to." Lena's eyes softened for a moment, but only a moment. "There were bodies down there, Paul. A message carved into the hull. A room that opened itself. That wasn't a coincidence. They were trying to tell us something before they died, or to keep you from following them." She looked back toward the sea. "Maybe those things aren't so different." The deck creaked as the vessel swayed. Paul sighed and walked away, muttering to the engineer about packing the sonar gear. But Lena stayed where she was, frozen in thought. In her cabin below deck, the tin case sat on the table, still sealed. She hadn't touched it since returning from the dive. The moment her fingers brushed it, she felt that hum again, low, electric, alive. She sat staring at it in the dim light. The lid reflected her face, warped by rust and time. Somewhere in the steel, the reflection seemed to breathe. Finally, she unlatched it. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and oil. The documents she'd taken from the auction were there. Maps, naval manifests, and one she hadn't noticed before. A torn page folded between two layers of parchment. She unfolded it carefully. It was a fragment of a logbook, handwritten in precise German script. "We leave tonight under sealed orders. Cargo aboard, classified. The captain says it will redeem us all." Another line below it, Base R12, awaiting confirmation. Lena frowned. The name was unfamiliar. She grabbed her laptop, scanning old archives. Hours passed as she dug through naval records, classified coordinates, wartime transmissions. Finally, a reference appeared, buried in a 1945 Allied intercept. Base R12, German experimental site, North Atlantic perimeter, possibly abandoned. Her pulse quickened. She marked the location, a stretch of coastline off northern Norway, deep in the fjords. The submarine's coordinates aligned perfectly with an outbound route from that base. She whispered to herself, they were running from something. The floor groaned beneath her feet. A metallic echo vibrated through the hull of the Astrius. It was faint but distinct. 3 slow knocks, deep, deliberate, rising through the ship like memory. Lena froze. "Paul," she called. No answer. She stepped into the corridor. The air was colder here, carrying a faint smell of brine and oil. Her boots echoed softly as she made her way toward the main deck. Every few steps, the knocking came against, eddy, rhythmic, the same as she'd heard inside the submarine. When she reached the deck, the crew stood motionless. Paul was by the railing, eyes fixed on the water. "You heard it too," she said quietly. He nodded without turning. "It's coming from below us." They leaned over the railing. The sea was black and still, mirroring the overcast sky. Then from somewhere in the depths a glimmer, faint, pulsing. Paul stepped back. "Tell me that's not the wreck." Lena's voice was barely a whisper. It followed us. The glow flickered once, twice, then vanished into the deep. No one spoke for the rest of the day. That night, the storm returned, sudden, violent, without warning. The wind screamed across the deck, ropes snapped, waves hammered against the hull like fists. Lena braced herself in the control room, shouting orders over the roar. Paul struggled with the navigation, the monitors flashing in chaotic bursts. A loud crash shook the ship. Starboard thrusters jammed. Someone yelled. Lena grabbed the railing, shouting into the calm. Power down engines. Hold course until the surge passes. The lights flickered, once, twice, and then the power died. The ship plunged into darkness. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then, from somewhere deep below, that same metallic groan returned, longer this time, like the ocean itself was twisting around them. Lena fumbled for her flashlight. The beam cut through the dark, landing on the tin case still on the table. Its lid had shifted open, though she hadn't touched it since earlier. Inside, something was glowing. A faint blue shimmer pulsed from beneath the documents, like light trapped in glass. She reached in slowly, her fingertips brushing cold metal. She pulled out a small object. A coin, tarnished but luminous, engraved with the same eagle insignia from the submarine. But beneath it, something else caught her eye. A photograph stuck to the bottom of the case. It showed the same submarine, docked near a frozen shoreline. Men stood beside it, their faces obscured by snow and light. But in the corner of the frame, a building rose from the ice, all angular, carved into the cliffside. Stamped beneath it, R12 Forschungseinrichtung, Research Facility R12. Lena's breath quickened. The storm raged louder outside, thunder cracking like cannon fire. She shoved the coin and photograph into her pocket and ran to the bridge. Paul was there, gripping the controls as the ship pitched violently. "We can't hold position," he shouted. "We have to drop anchor or we'll capsize." "Not here," she yelled back. "If we drop anchor over that wreck." A blinding flash of lightning split the sky, striking the water so close it turned the sea white. The shockwave threw her to the floor. The power surged back on for a split second, illuminating every console, every dial, and on one of the monitors, the sonar feed, she saw it, the wreck. The submarine was no longer stationary. It was rising. Her blood ran cold. "Paul, look." The image flickered, grainy but unmistakable. The outline of the submarine, ascending through the water like something pulled upward by invisible hands. "That's impossible," Paul whispered. The monitor went black. Outside, a single wave struck the Astrius so hard the deck tilted, sending crates and equipment crashing. The lights blew out again, plunging everything into darkness. Lena struggled to her feet, clutching the railing. Her heart hammered in her chest. Somewhere beneath them, the ocean was moving. Not waves, but something larger, older, alive. The sound came again, echoing through the hull. 3 knocks, then silence. Only this time they weren't coming from below. They were coming from inside the ship. As thunder rolled across the Atlantic, Lena realized the ghosts she had awakened were no longer confined to the deep. They were following her home. The storm battered the Astrius into the dark like a toy in a giant's hand. The sky and sea had become one endless mass of noise and shadow, lightning flashing across the horizon like the heartbeat of an angry god. But even through the chaos, Lena could still hear them. 3 deliberate knocks reverberating through the hull. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't the sea. It was from inside. The crew scrambled through the flickering corridors, shouting over the roar of the storm. Water seeped through the lower hatches, the metal shuddering with each wave. Paul burst into the control room, eyes wide. "We've sealed every compartment. There's nothing down there." Lena's face was pale in the red emergency light. "Then why does it sound like someone's walking under us?" The sound came again. This time 2 knocks, slow, heavy, directly below their feet. Paul froze, glancing toward the floor as if expecting it to give way. "Tell me you didn't bring something up." Lena swallowed. Her voice was a whisper, lost under the thunder. "I didn't take anything, not from the wreck." The lights flickered violently, then steadied on dim yellow. A low hum vibrated through the walls, like an electrical surge crawling along the ship's skin. The instruments on the console began to flash erratically. Depth readings, sonar bursts, coordinates scrolling across the screen faster than they could read. Then the radio crackled to life. A man's voice, faint, distorted, speaking in German. The transmission was decades old, but somehow alive. Nicht verlassen, R12, Vergebung. Lena's stomach turned. She knew that last word, forgiveness. Paul grabbed the receiver. "Repeat, who is this?" Static. The signal died. Outside, the storm roared harder, waves crashing like artillery. The ship lurched sideways, metal groaning under the strain. Lena clutched the railing, her mind spinning. The radio's frequency meter was still active, but instead of numbers, the screen now displayed a single set of coordinates. She recognized them instantly. "Base R12, she whispered. Paul turned. "What did you say?" "It's pointing to the base, the one they came from. It's still active, or something down there is transmitting." He shook his head. "That's impossible. The equipment." The ship jolted again, throwing them both against the console. Sparks flew from an exposed wire, filling the air with the acrid scent of burning insulation. Alarms wailed. Lena staggered to her feet. "We need to shut it down. Now." Paul sprinted toward the generator room, but Lena hesitated, glancing back at the open tin case on the table. The faint blue coin still glowed, pulsing softly, almost in rhythm with the knocking in the hull. She grabbed it instinctively, shoving it into her pocket before following him below deck. The corridors below were darker, narrower, the walls sweating condensation. Every creak sounded like footsteps following just behind them. When they reached the generator room, the smell of oil and ozone was suffocating. Paul yanked open a panel, sparks bursting as he disconnected a line. The humming faded. The emergency lights dimmed, replaced by the softer glow of storm lanterns. Then came a different sound, not knocking this time, breathing, faint, labored, human. Paul turned slowly toward the corridor. "Lena, tell me that's you." But she was staring past him, eyes wide. "Look." At the end of the hall, half hidden in shadow, stood a man, or what was left of one. His uniform was soaked and tattered, the insignia barely visible, his face pale as chalk beneath dripping hair. Water pooled at his feet, spreading slowly toward them. Paul stepped back. "What the?" The man raised his hand, a gesture not hostile, pleading. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then, faintly, Lena heard the word she had heard so many times before. "Vergebung, forgiveness." She froze. The air felt suddenly heavier, pressing in on her chest. "Paul, don't move." The figure blinked once, slowly, and then was gone. The puddle where he'd stood rippled once before vanishing into the floor grates. For several seconds neither of them spoke. The storm's rage above was distant now, muffled by the deafening silence of the ship. Paul's voice finally cracked the air. "We're leaving. Whatever this is, it's following you." Lena turned toward him, trembling. "It's not following me, it's following the truth." He grabbed her by the shoulders, voice breaking. "You don't understand. You opened that hatch. You brought their ghosts into the air again. The sea doesn't forgive that." She stared back at him, tears mixing with the salt on her cheeks. "Then maybe it's not the sea that wants forgiveness." He let go, breathing hard, eyes searching hers for the woman he'd known before this obsession began. But she was gone now, wallowed by something deeper than water. Above them, the radio crackled again, this time louder, more insistent, the same coordinates repeated over and over, a mechanical chant in an endless loop. Then, beneath the signal, another voice whispered, so low it was almost lost in the static. "Finish what we could not." The ship's lights flared. Every screen flickered with the same image, the outline of the submarine rising slowly through sonar static. Paul's voice broke. "It's back." Lena shook her head. "No, it never left." She ran toward the control deck, boots splashing through the water gathering on the floor. Outside, the storm had reached its peak, waves crashing over the railing, the sea glowing faintly beneath flashes of lightning. The water wasn't reflecting light, it was emitting it, a soft blue radiance spreading outward from the depths. Paul stumbled after her. "What is that?" Lena stared into the churning sea. A signal. The glow intensified, rising in slow pulses that illuminated the underside of the ship. For one terrifying second, she saw it, the submarine, rising from the deep, its hull gleaming like wet bone. The hatch she had opened was wide, releasing a trail of shimmering bubbles that coiled upward like smoke. The storm winds howled, the Astrius tilting dangerously. Paul grabbed the railing. "We're too close." Lena didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the wreck, the ghostly glow spilling from within. "They're showing us the way." "The way to what?" She turned to him, voice quiet but certain. "To where it all began." The submarine's light pulsed one final time, and then, just as suddenly, it sank back into the dark, leaving only the echo of its presence and the faint glow still burning in Lena's pocket. The sea calmed, the storm died as abruptly as it had begun. The sky above was blank again, colorless, quiet. Paul fell to his knees, breathing hard. "It's over," he said weakly. Lena looked down at the water, her reflection fractured by the ripples. "No," she whispered, "it's calling us to R12. Far below, unseen, the Atlantic groaned like a restless sleeper turning in its bed. The sound rolled through the hull and into the bones of everyone aboard. And in that trembling silence, Lena realized the truth she had been avoiding since the moment she found the map. The sea doesn't forget, it waits, and it was waiting for her. As the last glow faded beneath the waves, Lena felt the pull of something older than history, something that would not rest until she followed it into the dark once more. The Arctic wind screamed through the fjords like the voice of something long forgotten. Lena Corbett stood at the edge of the dock, her coat pulled tight, the photograph of the frozen facility clenched in her gloved hand. Weeks had passed since the storm over the Atlantic, yet the sound of those knocks, the slow, deliberate rhythm of the dead, still haunted her dreams. Now she was here, northern Norway, latitude 60, 9 degrees north, a coastline carved in silence and ice, where history went to disappear. The locals had warned her not to come. The old harbor master, a man with eyes clouded by age and memory, had shaken his head when she showed him the photo. "R12, he said, his voice brittle as frost. "That place is cursed. Germans came here in 44, built something into the cliffs. When the war ended, no one came back. The fjord swallowed it." Lena had thanked him, but her decision had been made long before she arrived. She could feel the weight of the coin in her pocket, still faintly warm despite the cold. It pulsed sometimes, softly, irregularly, like the echo of a heart that didn't belong to her. She boarded the small icebreaker Valhalla, captained by a weathered sailor named Eirik. He didn't ask questions. Men like him didn't need to. The sea had already taught them that some answers came at too high a price. The fjord narrowed as they moved deeper inland, cliffs rising on either side like walls of black glass. Frozen waterfalls hung suspended mid-cascade, jagged sculptures of light and silence. Snow drifted in slow spirals from the grey sky. settling on Lena's hood as she leaned against the rail, staring ahead. Eirik stood beside her, his voice nearly swallowed by the wind. "You really think you'll find anything out here? I already did," Lena replied. "Now I just need to know why it was hidden." He glanced at her pocket, at the faint blue light bleeding through the fabric. "Some things stay buried for a reason." Lena didn't answer. She was past warnings now. As the icebreaker pushed deeper into the fjord, visibility dropped to almost nothing. The fog thickened until the world seemed to vanish entirely, leaving only the hum of the engine and the slow groan of ice grinding against steel. Then, through the mist, something appeared. At first, it looked like a shadow, all jagged, almost part of the cliff itself. But as they drew closer, the shape took form, the remnants of a structure built into the mountain, its edges sharp, angular, distinctly man-made. The ruins of base R12. Eirik cut the engines. The vessel drifted forward on momentum alone, the silence stretching into eternity. The base was half collapsed, half consumed by ice. Rusted steel girders jutted from the cliffside like the ribs of a frozen beast. Sections of wall bore faint traces of German markings, eagles, numbers, faded words chiseled by wind and time. Lena stared in awe. "It's real." Eirik spat into the snow. "Real enough to kill you." She smiled faintly. "That's the point." They anchored near the edge of the ice shelf. Lena slung her gear pack over her shoulder and lowered herself into the snow. The air was colder here, different, sterile, almost metallic. Even the sound of her boots crunching seemed muted, swallowed by the mountain's silence. The entrance to the base was half buried in snow, a dark mouth framed by collapsed concrete. She brushed the frost away from a steel plate near the door, revealing faded letters. R12 for Schungsheim, Richtung Zutrecht verboten. Research facility R12, no entry. Her gloved hand lingered on the words. No entry. It was always the same message. The submarine, the hatch, the coin, all warnings, all ignored. With a deep breath, she switched on her headlamp and ducked inside. The passage sloped downward, lined with rusted pipes and frozen cables. Her breath fogged the air as she moved, the beam of her light catching on frost, covered instruments and collapsed control panels. The deeper she went, the stronger the smell of oil and decay became. Halfway down the corridor, she found the first body. Frozen in place, the skeleton wore the remnants of a German officer's uniform, his hand still gripping a pistol. The barrel was in his mouth. His other hand clutched a small notebook, encased in a thin layer of ice. Lena crouched, gently prying it free. The cover was brittle but intact. She opened it carefully, her breath catching as she read the first page. Day 48. The experiment is failing. The cargo is not stable. The captain says we must send it away before the base falls. Her stomach twisted. She flipped further. R12 was never meant to save us. It was meant to hide the sins of men who could not face God. The final line was smudged by water damage, but the last two words were clear. Forgive us. The word again. Vergebung? She stood slowly, the notebook pressed to her chest. The air around her felt colder, the shadows heavier. Somewhere in the distance, a low metallic groan echoed through the corridors, deep, resonant, alive. It wasn't the wind. Lena's flashlight flickered. She turned, scanning the passage behind her. Nothing but frost and ruin, but she could feel it, the same presence she'd felt beneath the sea, watching. Listening, she pressed forward. The corridor opened into a large chamber, the main operations hall. Tables lay overturned, equipment scattered, glass shattered across the floor. A single bulb still hung from the ceiling, encased in ice, glowing faintly with residual light. She stepped closer to the far wall. A map was pinned there, its edges stiff and curling. It showed the Atlantic, routes marked in red pencil, arrows pointing toward the wreck site she'd discovered, and scrawled across the bottom in shaky handwriting, "Return it to the depths." Her breath came out in a visible shudder. They hadn't been smuggling treasure. They had been disposing of something. A hiss echoed behind her. She spun around, heart hammering. The sound came from a broken ventilation shaft, air escaping slowly from somewhere deeper inside the facility. A faint mist drifted out, curling through the light like breath from a mouth that shouldn't exist. Then she heard the whisper. It wasn't words this time, just a single sigh, soft, almost human. The notebook slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a muffled thud. Her flashlight wavered. Shadows rippled across the ice, shifting in ways that didn't belong to her movement. Lena stepped back, breath trembling. Who's there? The silence that followed was too perfect, unnatural. Then came the first knock, not on metal this time, but from beneath the floor, slow, heavy, 3 times. Her entire body went cold, the same rhythm, the same sound from the submarine. She stumbled backward, the beam of her light sweeping across the walls, until it landed on a sealed metal door at the far end of the chamber. A symbol was painted on it in black, partially obscured by frost. Not military, something older. The air temperature dropped suddenly, her breath freezing midair. Lena took a single step forward, and from behind that door, a faint whisper rose through the steel, so quiet she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Lena, her name. The voice was male, soft, familiar. She stumbled back, colliding with the wall. The flashlight flickered out completely, plunging her into absolute darkness. The knocking stopped. Only the whisper remained. Lena? Her heart pounded so violently it hurt. She fumbled for her emergency light, hands shaking, breath ragged. The beam flared to life, and the door was now slightly ajar. She hadn't touched it. The voice was gone, replaced by the slow drip of melting ice echoing through the hall. Lena stared at the opening, the thin line of blackness within it. She could smell something faintly metallic wafting out. Old blood and rust, sealed too long in the dark. Her instincts screamed to leave, her curiosity whispered to enter, and somewhere deep inside her, something else, the same voice that had guided her since the auction, said softly, "Keep going." Lena took one trembling step toward the door. As the wind howled through the broken corridors, she realized that some places weren't abandoned. They were waiting. The heavy metal door stood half open, a black line of invitation carved into the frozen wall. Frost clung to its hinges like veins of glass, and every gust of wind through the corridor whispered her name again, soft, shapeless, without echo. Lena stood in the threshold, every instinct screaming to turn back. Yet she knew retreat had ceased to be an option the moment she arrived here. Her gloved hand brushed the steel. It was warm. She hesitated, staring down the dark passage beyond. The warmth shouldn't have been possible, not in this dead, frozen ruin, yet she could feel it, faintly pulsing beneath the surface, like blood beneath skin. Lena lifted her flashlight and stepped through. The beam sliced through the dark, illuminating a narrow stairway that spiraled downward into the mountain's heart. The air was damp here, tinged with the stale scent of machine oil and something older decay, preserved by cold and secrecy. Her breath hung in the air, each exhale visible in the narrow cone of light. The steps groaned under her boots, sending echoes that traveled far beyond what the space should have allowed. It was like descending into an organ built for ghosts, every sound drawn out, amplified, distorted. Halfway down, she noticed the walls changing. The raw rock gave way to metal-polished steel, seamless, humming faintly with residual energy. The deeper she went, the warmer it became, and the soft vibration under her feet grew steadier, rhythmic, alive. At the bottom of the stairway, a large circular door waited identical to the hatch on the submarine. Its center bore the same engraved eagle, wings spread wide, talons clutching the symbol of emptiness. She shone her light across it and froze. Written beneath the emblem, etched by hand rather than machine, were words in German: "Let it sleep. The sea was mercy." Her throat tightened. "Mercy?" she whispered. That's what they thought they were doing. She found the control wheel, the same type of mechanism she'd turned beneath the Atlantic. Her hands trembled as she gripped it, frost biting through her gloves. "Just a look," she muttered. "Just to see." The wheel resisted. Then, with a deep metallic sigh, it began to turn. A rush of air hissed from the seams as pressure equalized. The steel door unlocked with a dull clang, and the sound reverberated down the passage like the slow toll of a bell. She pushed it open. The chamber beyond was vast, a domed room carved directly into the ice, lined with strange machinery that looked too advanced for 1940s engineering. Consoles were fused with crystal, like growths, glass tubes filled with frozen vapor, wires embedded in the walls like veins in flesh. At the center stood a massive cylindrical container 10 feet tall, frosted over but faintly glowing from within. Lena approached slowly, her light sweeping over the glass. The frost inside was uneven, as if something had shifted within. Her breath caught when she wiped away a section of ice with her sleeve. Inside lay a human figure. A man, preserved perfectly in the translucent glow. His eyes were closed, his face serene, his uniform pristine even after 80 years. The insignia on his chest bore a nameplate, tarnished but legible. Marcus felt, the captain. Lena's heart nearly stopped. She stepped closer, pressing her hand against the glass. His expression wasn't one of terror or pain, but the peace of someone who had made an impossible decision. She whispered, "You sent the submarine away, didn't you?" As if in answer, the lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, mechanical at first, then almost human. The machines lining the walls began to stir, their indicators blinking weakly back to life. The sound of static bled into the air like a whisper rising from a dream. Then, through the faint buzz of electricity, a voice crackled from an overhead speaker. Male, German, calm. "If you are hearing this, then the sea has failed to keep its promise." Lena froze, eyes darting toward the ceiling. The voice was old, distorted, but it was his. Marcus felt. "We were ordered to hide what they had made. They called it salvation. I called it theft of the human soul." The recording faltered, replaced by static. Then continued. "They believed they could capture consciousness, store it, preserve it. What they created was neither man nor spirit. It was memory without mercy. It cannot die." Lena's pulse thundered. She stepped back from the glass, horror twisting through her. "We sealed the experiment here, beneath the ice, and sent the cargo away. The submarine carried what could not be destroyed, the vessel of their sin. If anyone finds this..." The voice broke into a cough, weak, desperate. "Forgive us. Do not open what the ocean has hidden. Let the deep keep its dead." Silence followed. The hum of the machines subsided until only the faint crackling of the overhead lights remained. Lena stood perfectly still, the words sinking into her like ice. The cargo, the crates she'd seen in the submarine, hadn't been gold or art or stolen wealth. It had been something alive, something that couldn't die. The realization clawed at her chest. Every knock, every whisper, every echo that followed her since the hatch had opened it wasn't haunting. It was summoning. She turned to leave, and then the light from the cylinder changed. The glow deepened from pale white to deep, throbbing blue. The ice cracked. A spiderweb of fractures raced across the glass, spreading faster than she could move. She stumbled backward, her flashlight flickering as the chamber filled with a low, rising hum that wasn't mechanical anymore, it was vocal. The glass shattered. A rush of freezing mist exploded outward, swallowing the room in a veil of light and cold. Lena shielded her face, coughing as shards of ice clattered against her coat. Through the haze, she could see the outline of a figure stepping forward slow, deliberate, its shape haloed in the glow. "Captain Felt," she whispered. The shape stopped. Then, slowly, it turned its head. The eyes that met hers were not human. They were black mirrors reflecting the faint blue pulse of the coin in her pocket, beating in rhythm with the sound of her heart. She stumbled backward toward the stairwell, fumbling for the radio clipped to her belt. "Paul, come in. Paul, do you read?" Static. The figure took a step forward. The lights around it flickered violently, each pulse syncing with the rhythm of its breath, if it even breathed at all. Lena's mind screamed for her to run, but her body refused. There was something magnetic, almost sorrowful, in the way it moved. When it finally spoke, the voice wasn't Felt's anymore. It was layered, 100 whispers, threaded together into one. "You opened what we buried." The sound reverberated through the chamber, vibrating in her bones. Lena backed into the stairwell, nearly tripping. "I didn't know." The figure tilted its head, expression unreadable. "You remembered, that is enough." The floor shuddered. The machines flared once, violently, before dying. The light vanished. The room fell into absolute darkness. Then came the final whisper, echoing from the void. "R12 was never abandoned. We are still here." Lena turned and ran, her boots slipping on the frost as she climbed. Every step felt heavier, every breath sharper. Behind her, the sound of footsteps followed, slow, steady, patient. When she burst through the main door into the screaming wind, the light from the facility's entrance glowed faintly blue. The snow around her shimmered as though alive, the frost spreading outward in veins that pulsed like arteries. She stumbled into the snow, collapsing beside the icebreaker. Eirik ran toward her, eyes wide. "What happened?" he shouted. She couldn't answer. Her hands were trembling too violently. She just whispered the only word that made sense. "Forgiveness." The light from the cliff flickered once more and then died completely, leaving only the endless white of the Arctic night. Eirik stared at the mountain. "What did you find down there?" Lena looked back toward the darkness, her voice hollow. "Something that shouldn't remember." As the fjord fell silent, she knew the story buried beneath the ice wasn't over, it had only awakened from its sleep. The world above the Arctic was quiet again, deceptively quiet. Snow drifted across the empty dock in slow spirals, burying the footprints that led back to Valhalla. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silence so absolute it felt artificial, as though nature itself was holding its breath. Lena Corbett stood on the deck, wrapped in a heavy coat, staring toward the fjord's mouth. Her reflection swayed in the black water below, pale, haunted, with eyes that had seen too much and yet refused to close. 3 days had passed since the incident at R12, 3 days since the voice in the dark chamber had spoken her name. The local police had dismissed her report as stress-induced hysteria, old mines, gas leaks, hallucinations, they'd said. But they hadn't seen the frost patterns on her skin, the ones that pulsed faintly, blue beneath her sleeve whenever she was near metal. Eirik had already left, saying nothing, only crossing himself before disappearing into the snow. That was the moment Lena knew she was alone again, truly, profoundly alone. Back in her cabin at the Harbour Inn, she sat at a small wooden table, staring at the tin case resting in front of her. The coin inside still glowed faintly, as if aware of her attention. The photograph of the submarine and the frozen facility lay beside it, edges warped from moisture. The room smelled of sea salt and cold air. Her hands shook as she unfolded the logbook page she had taken from the dead officer in R12. The last line burned in her mind. It cannot die. She had tried to sleep, but each night she heard the same whisper, soft, deliberate, too real to be imagination. You opened what we buried. When the knock came on her door, she almost didn't react. It wasn't until the third, measured tap that she looked up. Miss Corbett, the voice was smooth, refined, foreign, confident, the kind that belonged to a man used to being obeyed. Lena rose slowly, fingers brushing the revolver she kept under the table. "Who's asking?" "Someone who believes you found something remarkable," the voice replied. She opened the door. A man stood in the hallway, tall, dressed in a tailored black coat, his hair silvered at the temples. His face was sharp but calm, his eyes the color of steel after rain. He smiled faintly, polite but predatory. "Elias Brandt," he said, extending a gloved hand. "Collector, historian, occasionally a benefactor." Lena didn't take his hand. "You found me fast. I make it a habit to know where history surfaces." His gaze flicked to the table behind her, to the faint blue glow leaking from the tin case. "May I?" "No." He smiled wider, unfazed. "Then allow me to explain why I'm here. You've stumbled upon something exceptional, a find that could rewrite the last chapter of the Second World War, and I suspect you're in over your head." "I've heard that before," she said dryly. Brandt stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "But never from someone who could fund your work for life." Lena studied him carefully. Everything about him radiated wealth, the quiet arrogance of someone who never needed to ask twice. But beneath that polish was something else, something colder. Curiosity sharpened into hunger. "What is it you think I found?" Brandt gestured toward the case. "Not what you found. Who?" "Marcus Felt, the man in the ice." Lena's stomach turned. "You know about him?" "I know about everything connected to R12, he said softly. "The Reich funded hundreds of secret projects during the war, most of them meaningless. But R12 was different. It wasn't a military facility. It was a preservation site." She frowned. "Preservation of what?" Brandt's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Memory, consciousness, the attempt to make a man eternal." The air between them thickened. Lena felt that faint pulse in her arm again, the same rhythm as the coin. "You're saying they succeeded. I'm saying you woke him up." Her blood went cold. He stepped around her, his eyes gliding over the scattered documents on the table. "I can help you control it, understand it. Whatever technology exists inside that mountain, it's beyond anything in our grasp. Together, we could bring it to light safely." Lena forced herself to breathe. "And by safely, you mean profitably?" Brandt chuckled softly. "Safety is an expensive business. I prefer not to separate the two." She closed the case abruptly. "You want to weaponize it? I want to protect it from those who would misuse it. The difference," he said, slipping his gloves off, "is that I know how the world works." Lena turned away, pacing toward the window. Outside, snow fell in slow, hypnotic spirals, covering the harbor in white silence. The reflection of the room shimmered faintly in the glass. Brandt behind her, hands folded, watching her like a chess master studying a trapped piece. "I'm not selling it," she said finally. "Then don't sell." He replied calmly. "Partner," she turned, "you think I'd trust someone who tracked me to the Arctic like prey?" He smiled almost kindly. "You don't have to trust me, just trust what you saw. Tell me, when you opened the hatch, did you feel it?" Lena's heart skipped. "Feel what?" "That moment where time stopped," he said quietly, "when it felt like the world was holding its breath. That's the threshold. The thing they created at R12 exists between not life, not death, a perfect echo." His words burrowed deep, matching what she had felt. what she'd refused to admit. The way the air had bent in the chamber, the way the voice had known her name. "How do you know all this?" she demanded. "Because," he said, meeting her eyes, "I've been searching for R12 my entire life." The room felt smaller suddenly. The old wood groaned, the walls closing in with the weight of his revelation. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a thin folder. "Here," he said, placing it on the table, "proof that I can offer more than curiosity, funding, protection, an entire research vessel ready to return to the site. All I ask is partnership." Lena didn't move. She stared at the folder, then at the case, then back at him. "What's in it for you?" she asked softly. He didn't hesitate. "Closure." The way he said it made the words sound like confession. Lena finally reached for the folder, flipping it open. Inside were photographs, satellite images, excavation permits, dossiers on names she recognized from wartime archives. But one image stopped her cold, a photograph of herself. Brant smiled gently. "You weren't the first to go looking for it, Miss Corbett. You were simply the first to survive." She felt the floor tilt under her. "You've been following me since the auction. I prefer the word observing. You have a remarkable instinct for uncovering what others overlook. It's why I need you." "Need me for what?" "To finish what Marcus Felt began." Lena's breath caught. "You mean, to return it?" Brant's eyes glimmered with something that wasn't quite agreement. "Something like that." The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. The faint blue light seeped through the crack of the case again, brighter now as though it could hear them. Brant's gaze drifted toward it, his pupils dilating slightly. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured. "That pull, the way it calls to you in the silence." Lena's fingers curled against her palm. "You don't know what it is." He looked at her, expression soft, almost pitying. "Oh, I do. It's the part of humanity that refused to die." The words lingered in the air like smoke. Lena closed the folder slowly, her voice low but steady. "If I agree to this, we do it my way. We find out what's down there, and then we destroy it. For good." Brant smiled, the kind of smile that could mean anything, of course. He said, "Your way." But in his eyes there was already victory. Lena turned toward the window again. The harbor lights flickered in the falling snow, reflections trembling on the water's surface. Somewhere deep beneath that same sea, she could feel the echo again, faint, patient, alive. This wasn't partnership. It was a bargain, and she knew bargains made with ghosts always ended the same way. As the night settled over the frozen harbor, Lena realized she hadn't escaped the deep, she had merely brought it ashore. The next morning arrived without sunlight, only a faint, colorless haze stretching across the horizon. The world felt drained, like even the sky had grown wary of looking down on what was about to begin. Lena sat by the harbor cafe's window, watching as Brant's convoy arrived through the snow. 3 black SUV gliding silently through the frost, their tires whispering against ice. He'd moved fast, too fast. By the time she stepped outside, the lead vehicle's door was already open. Brant emerged, immaculate as ever, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. A man used to command, to control, to being the calm at the center of every storm. "Miss Corbett," he greeted, voice smooth as the frost beneath her boots. "I trust you've reconsidered my offer." Lena's gaze flicked toward the pier, where a sleek research vessel, far larger and more advanced than Valhalla, waited under armed supervision. The name painted on its hull read Erebus Roman, too. A fitting name, she thought grimly. In Greek myth, Erebus was the personification of darkness itself. "You move quickly for a historian," she said. Brant's eyes gleamed with amusement. "History rewards the prepared. Shall we?" He gestured toward the vessel. Inside, warmth and luxury collided with clinical precision. The interior was all steel, glass, and quiet wealth. Men in dark uniforms moved efficiently through the corridors, not sailors. not scientists, but something in between. Security with too much discipline for comfort. Lena trailed behind Brandt as he led her toward the main operations deck. Every detail screamed control, even the hum of the engines was subdued, engineered for silence. Screens lined the walls, showing sonar readings, weather maps, and classified schematics of the Norwegian coast. "How did you get access to this?" Lena asked. Brandt smiled faintly. "Access is a matter of interest. I have both the funding and the influence. You have the knowledge. Together, we have purpose." He motioned for her to sit. A map flickered to life on the display before them, the outline of the North Atlantic, marked with red routes and circles. At the center, the coordinates of the wreck, 61 degrees north, 4 degrees west. "Your find has drawn attention," he said. "Governments, private institutions, intelligence networks, but none understand what they're chasing. You and I do." Lena's voice was low. "You think you understand it." Brandt tilted his head slightly. "You saw it, didn't you? The figure in the ice, the voice that spoke to you. You know what's waiting down there isn't just an artifact." Her pulse quickened, though she kept her face still. "It's not waiting for you." "Ah," he said softly. "But it spoke through you, didn't it? You brought it back to the surface. That makes you its conduit." Lena stiffened. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "I know precisely what I'm dealing with," he replied, calm and cold. "A technological anomaly, a bridge between the organic and the eternal. If Felt's work succeeded, it could change everything about the human condition. No more loss, no more decay. Imagine being able to preserve consciousness indefinitely." Lena's voice was sharp. "You mean playing God?" He smiled faintly. "Every era calls its scientists heretics before it builds monuments to them." The conversation ended there, but the silence between them was electric charged, dangerous. Hours later, the Erebus Roman II left the harbor, slicing through sheets of fog as the coast vanished behind them. The sea stretched out ahead like an unbroken mirror, cold and endless. The further they went, the quieter the world became. No gulls, no wind, just the sound of engines humming beneath layers of ice and intent. Lena stood alone on deck, wrapped in a heavy parka, staring at the horizon. She thought of Felt's final words, the ones recorded in that chamber of ice. "Do not open what the ocean has hidden." But here she was again returning to the grave she'd disturbed. She pulled the coin from her pocket, its glow muted in the daylight. The pulse inside it was stronger now, almost in sync with her heartbeat. She closed her fist around it, whispering to the waves, "I shouldn't have taken you." Behind her, the deck creaked softly. "Regret," Brandt said, stepping into the cold beside her. "A luxury of the living." Lena didn't turn. "You really think you can control it?" He smiled, hands clasped behind him as he gazed at the sea. "Control is an illusion, Miss Corbett. I prefer to think in terms of direction. History doesn't need another man trying to direct it." "Perhaps not," he said, "but history is written by those who dare to try." His reflection in the water was a perfect mirror until the light beneath them flickered. Lena froze. "Did you see that?" The sea pulsed faintly once, like a living thing breathing beneath the ice. The glow spread for a moment, then faded, leaving the water black again. Brandt's eyes narrowed. "Fascinating." "It's not fascinating," Lena snapped. "It's a warning." He turned to face her fully now, his tone almost tender. "You see fear where I see possibility. What lies beneath us isn't a curse, Lena. It's proof that humanity can transcend its own mortality. By trapping souls in machines," she demanded, "by ensuring nothing is ever truly lost." He said softly, "Isn't that why you became an archaeologist? To save what time forgets?" His words struck deep. He was right, or at least he understood how to sound like he was. Lena looked out over the endless sea, her voice hollow. "Some things are meant to be forgotten." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled again, almost sadly. You still believe forgetting is mercy? That's what makes you human, but mercy isn't truth. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun. Brant walked back toward the bridge, leaving her alone with the whispering wind and the faint, rhythmic pulse of the sea below. By nightfall, the temperature had dropped. Ice crystals formed along the railing, glinting under the floodlights like stars scattered across steel. Lena stood beside the equipment bay, watching Brant's team unload diving gear heavy suits, compressed oxygen tanks, sealed crates labeled with corporate insignias she didn't recognize. It didn't look like a research operation. It looked like an extraction. She turned to one of the technicians. Where's all this headed? He hesitated, glancing toward the bridge. Orders are to descend at dawn. Doctor, Brant says the retrieval must happen before the current shifts. Retrieval of what? He shrugged. The captain's orders didn't say, just that it's sealed cargo. Lena's blood ran cold. She knew exactly what that meant. She hurried to the control room. Brant was there, examining sonar data on the central display. The outline of the submarine was already visible, the wreck's silhouette glowing faintly on the screen like a scar reopened. Brant, you can't do this, she said. That wreck isn't salvage, it's containment. He looked up calmly. Containment is just preservation by another name. Listen to me, she said, stepping closer. The man you think you're honoring felt he didn't preserve anything. He buried it. He begged us not to bring it back. Brant's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. And yet you did. You opened the hatch, Miss Corbett. You brought us here. Perhaps that was never a mistake. Perhaps it was destiny. The word hit her like a blow. Destiny, the lie history always told before it repeated itself. She leaned forward, her voice breaking. If you touch what's down there, the sea won't forgive you. He smiled faintly. The sea doesn't forgive, it forgets. The words lingered like frost in the air. As she turned to leave, the sonar pinged sharply a new contact. Not the submarine, something larger, moving. Brant's calm faltered for the first time. What is that? Lena stared at the screen, her heart pounding. The object on the display shifted course straight toward them. Something that remembers, she whispered. The room went silent. Only the steady, patient pulse of the sonar filled the void. And outside, beneath the ship, the sea began to glow again, a soft, spreading blue, rising toward them like memory returning to the surface. As the darkness stirred beneath the waves, Lena realized that Brant hadn't just awakened what was buried, he had invited it home. The ocean was no longer still. It pulsed beneath the Erebus Roman II like a living thing, vast, patient, and ancient. Even through the hull, Lena could feel it. That low, rhythmic vibration that wasn't mechanical, wasn't natural. It was alive. By dawn, the sea had turned the color of lead. Fog crawled low over the waves, blurring the horizon into nothingness. The crew moved like shadows, efficient, silent, their faces pale under the dim deck lights. Every man aboard felt it in his bones, the weight of something rising. Brant stood at the bow, hands clasped behind him, staring into the fog as if he were expecting an answer. "It's close," he murmured, his breath fogging the air. "Do you feel it, Lena?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The sonar readings flickered violently across the screen, impossible movements, unnatural depths. The submarine was moving again. Depth. She asked the technician beside her. 4,000. No, 3,800 and rising. She felt her chest tighten. That's impossible. It's been buried for decades. Brant turned toward her, calm, deliberate. And yet, here it comes. The sonar pinged again, faster now, echoing through the ship like a heartbeat. The blue glow beneath the vessel intensified, spreading in vast circles through the dark water. The men on deck leaned over the railing, trying to see what lay beneath the shifting mist. Then, slowly, it emerged. The wreck, rising through the fog like a memory surfacing from oblivion, barnacle, encrusted metal, shattered antennae, a hull split and rusted but whole, impossibly whole. The eagle insignia still clung to the tower, faint but defiant, as though even time had been afraid to erase it. Lena gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles went white. It's not possible. Brant's eyes gleamed. It's miraculous. The ship's engines hummed as they held position. Water churned violently around the wreck, swirling with unnatural force. The air itself seemed to vibrate, filled with a low hum, not sound, but something deeper, something that resonated inside the body. Lena stepped back from the edge. "Turn it off," she said. Brant frowned. "Turn what off? Whatever equipment you're running. The sonar, the electromagnetic arrays, it's responding to us." He shook his head. "No, Lena, we're responding to it." The look in his eyes sent a chill through her deeper than the Arctic air. This wasn't science anymore. It was worship. He gestured to his team. "Deploy the dive module." A hiss of hydraulics cut through the air as the submersible cradle lowered toward the sea. The smaller vessel, Narade Roman 3, hung above the water, gleaming under the floodlights. Lena grabbed his arm. "You're going down there. You can't," he smiled. "Of course I can, and you're coming with me." She pulled back, shaking her head. "No, you have no idea what's waiting." His voice softened, almost tender. "On the contrary, I've waited for it all my life." "Waited for what?" Brant's eyes flicked toward the dark water. "The truth." Lena turned away, staring at the glowing surface. The light beneath the waves shifted, pulsing faster, almost beckoning. A faint vibration rippled through the hull beneath her feet. The metal groaned as if in pain. The technician shouted from the console, "We're losing magnetic stability. It's drawing current from the generators." The deck lights dimmed, flickered, then steadied on a strange blue hue, the same color as the glow beneath the sea. The air smelled faintly of ozone and salt. Brant didn't hesitate. "Launch the submersible." Lena's voice rose over the storm of noise. "You'll kill everyone on this ship." He turned to her, his composure unbroken. "Then we'll die knowing the truth." For a moment, she saw it clearly, the fanatic beneath the polished exterior, the man who didn't want discovery but communion. Brant wasn't searching for knowledge. He was seeking resurrection. She grabbed his arm again, desperate now. "Listen to me, that submarine wasn't carrying treasure, it was carrying something they were trying to destroy. They called it the vessel of consciousness. It's not human anymore." He studied her quietly, his face unreadable. Then, finally, he smiled again, slow, measured, chilling. "Then it's time humanity evolved." He motioned to the divers, "Prepare Miss Corbett's gear." The crew obeyed without hesitation. Within minutes, Lena was suited in thermal underlayers, breathing mask hanging loose at her neck. Every movement felt dreamlike, as if she were watching someone else prepare for this. As she stepped toward the submersible's open hatch, the sound of the sea shifted lower now, almost melodic. It wasn't noise anymore. It was language, a rhythm of meaning that pulsed against her chest, her pulse sinking unconsciously with it. "You opened what we buried." Her head snapped toward the water. The words weren't sound this time, they were vibration, inside her skull, too clear to deny. She staggered back, clutching the railing. "It's speaking." Brant's expression flickered with awe. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The crew watched silently as the submersible lowered into the sea. The moment its metal skin touched the glowing water, the light spread outward like veins across the surface. Lena climbed in after Brant, her voice tight. "If we do this, we may not come back." He smiled faintly. "Then at least we'll know what waits beyond the end of the world." The hatch sealed with a hiss. Darkness swallowed them. The descent began slow at first, then faster as the engines stabilized. The sea closed over the glass dome. the light from the Erebus Roman II fading above them like a dying star. Inside the cockpit, the control panels flickered. Lena sat rigid beside Brant, her reflection ghosting over the glass as the ocean swallowed them whole. At 1,000 meters, the blue glow returned, faint at first, then growing stronger. It pulsed from below a heartbeat that wasn't theirs. Brant whispered, "Magnificent." Lena said nothing. Her eyes were fixed on the sonar feed. The wreck appeared ahead, its outline distorted by the glow. But there was something new this time, movement inside. "Do you see that?" she breathed. "Figures, dozens of them. Human shapes drifting through the corridors, too solid to be illusions, too slow to be living." They floated weightlessly through the submerged passageways, their forms glowing faintly like candlelight under glass. Brant leaned forward, eyes wide, the crew, still here. "They're not alive," she said. "They're echoes." The submersible drew closer. The wreck's tower loomed above them like a tombstone rising from the dark. The hatch she had opened weeks ago was still there, still ajar, but now a faint light pulsed from within, slow and deliberate, like breath. Her voice trembled. "It's awake." The sonar screeched. A distortion appeared behind them, massive, unidentifiable. "Something's moving." Before Brant could respond, the water around the sub trembled. The light from the wreck flared, bathing everything in cold fire. Lena shielded her eyes, feeling the vibration ripple through her body like electricity. Then the voice came again, not inside her mind this time, but everywhere. Through the metal, through the current, through her blood. "You should not have come back." The lights inside the sub flickered violently, instruments shattered. The hull groaned under pressure, alarms wailing in a chorus of terror. Lena grabbed Brant's arm. "We have to go," but he didn't move. He was staring through the glass, transfixed. Outside, one of the glowing figures had drifted close to the viewport. It was looking directly at him. Its face was pale, hollow, preserved. Marcus felt. Lena's blood ran cold. Brant whispered, "He's beautiful." The figure's lips moved words forming soundlessly through the glass. Then the water shook. The wreck split open from within, releasing a column of light that tore through the abyss like a sun being born underwater. The current caught the submersible, hurling it backward into the dark. Lena screamed, clutching the console. The pressure alarms screamed louder. Brant's voice was calm, serene, a man staring at a miracle. "Do you see it now, Lena? Do you see what they became?" Through the blur of light and chaos, she saw it, the forms inside the wreck merging, folding into the light itself, their outlines melting into something vast, formless, and terrifyingly conscious. The abyss had opened again. And this time it wasn't going to close. As the sea roared around them, Lena realized that what had once been buried under the waves was no longer content to sleep. It wanted the world to remember. The world was no longer water. It was light, endless, blinding, impossible light. The ocean around the submersible pulsed in rhythmic waves, not motion, but heartbeat. Every molecule of water felt charged with memory, vibrating with fragments of voices that didn't belong to the living. Lena's earpiece was flooded with static that sounded too much like whispers, while the hull shuddered as if the sea itself were alive. "You opened what we buried." The voice wasn't human. It was the voice of the deep, ancient, collective, resonant. Lena gritted her teeth, clutching the controls. "We need to ascend now," but Brant didn't move. His eyes were locked on the viewport, unblinking, glassy with awe. The light from the wreck reflected in them, blue, infinite, godlike. "Brant," she shouted, "we'll be crushed." He turned toward her slowly, his expression calm, almost serene. "Do you hear them? They're not dead, Lena. They're awake." "They're not alive either," she shouted back. "They're trapped." He smiled faintly. Trapped is just another word for preserved. Lena slammed the emergency controls, cutting power to the stabilizers and redirecting to ascent. The sub lurched upward, but the sea resisted a current pulling them back, like invisible hands gripping the hull. The entire craft groaned, alarms flashing red across the control panel. Outside, the wreck trembled. Plates of steel tore away as though peeled by unseen force. From the ruptured hull, tendrils of light unfurled not beams, but forms, humanoid and shifting. They drifted upward toward the sub, each moving with deliberate grace, their faces faint, indistinct. The crew, the ones who'd been lost, their eyes glowed with the same impassable blue. Lena's breath caught. There, following us, Brant leaned closer to the glass, voice filled with reverence. No, they're welcoming us. A sharp bang reverberated through the cabin. One of the manipulator arms outside had twisted under the pressure, snapping free. The hull creaked dangerously, water seeping through a crack in the window frame. Lena pulled the radio. Erebus, this is Narrade Roman 3. We're compromised. Initiate winch recovery now. Static. Then, faintly, a voice. Copy visual interference. Hold position, damn it, she hissed. The sub rocked again, buffeted by unseen currents. Brant was still staring through the viewport, whispering something under his breath. Latin, German, she couldn't tell. His lips moved like a man in prayer. Elias, she snapped. Help me stabilize or we'll die down here. He turned toward her, eyes glowing faintly now with reflected blue. You don't understand, Lena. We were never meant to escape it. She froze. What are you talking about? This isn't a curse, he said softly. It's an invitation. They built R12 to preserve the soul, to make it eternal. Felt finished it, and now it's calling for completion. Completion, she said, backing away. You mean consumption. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, the twin of her glowing coin. Its surface pulsed with the same light, synchronized with the heartbeat of the abyss. I found this long before you did, Brant whispered. It led me here to you, to this moment. Lena's eyes widened. You knew what was down here. I believed it could save us. Save us, you think this thing is salvation. He smiled faintly, his voice lowering to a reverent murmur. It's evolution. Before she could react, he pressed the coin against the console. The system's lights flared violently, the monitors glitching into static. The pulse from the coin spread through the sub's circuits, sending a hum through the entire structure. Stop it, she screamed, lunging toward him. The moment her hand touched his arm, the world exploded in light. Time fractured. She wasn't in the sub anymore, not entirely. She was inside something vast, something impossible. Memories swirled around her like currents, men shouting in German. Orders barked through radios, explosions, the smell of oil and blood. She saw the submarine's original voyage felt, and his crew, terrified, desperate, clutching crates that pulsed with the same blue light. Then, another memory, the chamber beneath R12. Scientists arguing, one man screaming, "You cannot trap a soul," before being silenced by a gunshot. And then, Marcus Felt's voice. Forgiveness must come from those who remember. Lena gasped, clutching her head. The visions shattered like glass. She fell backward, slamming against the sub's console. The world snapped back into place. The hull screamed under pressure, alarms howling. The water outside was no longer blue, it was black, swirling with fragments of light that twisted like faces. Brant was on his knees, blood dripping from his nose, still clutching the coin. He looked up at her, his voice trembling with awe. It showed me everything, the connection, the transfer. What transfer? The cargo they carried. He whispered. The letters, the gold, none of it mattered. It was a vessel. They were moving consciousness, bottled human thought. You saw it, didn't you? You felt it. Lena's stomach turned. You're insane. He laughed weakly. No, Lena, I'm enlightened. Before she could respond, a violent tremor ripped through the sub. One of the external floodlights shattered, plunging half the cabin into darkness. Outside, the glowing figures had multiplied, forming a circle around the sub, dozens, maybe hundreds of them. The sonar screamed, then died. Lena's voice trembled. Elias, what are they doing? He stared out the glass, eyes wide with reverence. They're choosing. What? The vessel. A low hum began, rising from the wreck below. The light spread through the water, enveloping the submersible. The entire ocean around them seemed to vibrate, filled with the sound of voices overlapping, chanting, pleading. Lena pressed her hands to her ears, screaming, "Stop it! Stop it!" The glass of the viewport cracked, a single, sharp fracture splitting it down the center. Water began to seep in. Brant turned toward her, smiling through tears. "Do you see now? We aren't separate. We never were." He reached out, touching her cheek with trembling fingers. "It's already inside you." Lena recoiled, slamming the override switch. The sub's emergency ascent engines roared to life, pushing them upward through the current. The light below flared violently, then began to fade. The pressure screamed against the hull, threatening to crush them. She kept her hands locked on the controls, fighting to hold steady. Hold together, hold together. Brant's voice was soft behind her. "You can't escape it, Lena." She didn't look back. "Watch me." The ascent felt endless. The glow faded, replaced by darkness, pure, suffocating black. The only sound was the engine's dying hum and the rattle of metal under pressure. Then finally, light. The surface burst open above them, blinding white daylight flooding the cockpit. The Erebus Roman 2 loomed ahead, its deck chaotic with motion as the crew scrambled to pull them aboard. Lena gasped for breath, collapsing against the console. Her hands shook violently, her body aching with exhaustion. The hatch opened with a metallic clang. Cold air rushed in, followed by shouting. Hands pulled her up, dragging her out onto the deck. Brant followed, but slower, deliberate. He stood on the platform, drenched, eyes glassy, that faint blue light still flickering behind them. "Elias," she shouted, "we have to destroy it now. The wreck, the site, all of it." He smiled faintly, water dripping from his hair. "You still don't understand. It's not down there anymore." Lena froze. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "It came with us." Behind him, the water began to glow again, soft at first, then brighter, spreading outward in rings of living blue. The crew stumbled back in horror as the light climbed the side of the ship, crawling over metal, wrapping around cables and cranes like veins of fire. The sea was claiming the surface now, spreading its memory across steel and air alike. Lena's breath came shallow. "What have we done?" Brant looked up at the sky, his face serene. "We've set it free." The wind howled through the rigging, carrying the faint echo of voices, hundreds of them whispering in unison from the waves. "Forgiveness." Lena stumbled back as the glow reached her boots, the metal beneath her feet thrumming like a pulse. She clutched the railing, her voice breaking. "No, no, it can't end like this." But the sea didn't answer. It only shimmered, beautiful and terrible, as the abyss opened once again, not beneath them this time, but all around. As the horizon burned with ghostly light, Lena realized the truth too late. What the ocean had kept for 80 years was never meant to stay buried. It had been waiting to return. The world above the waves had no idea what had awakened beneath them. To the public, the Erebus Roman 2 disaster was written off as an accident, a systems malfunction during an experimental dive off the Norwegian coast. The official report mentioned catastrophic hull failure and limited survivor recovery. But there were no details, no cause, no truth. Only Lena Corbett knew what really happened, and now she was running The first week after the wreck blurred into a haze of airports, train stations, and rain-slicked city streets. She moved like a shadow through Europe, Bergen to Amsterdam, Amsterdam to Prague, Prague to Vienna, never staying in one place long enough to be found. Every reflection in a cafe window made her flinch. Every sound of footsteps behind her twisted her stomach into knots. But no matter how far she ran, she could still feel it, the pulse, the same rhythmic vibration she'd felt beneath the sea, faint but constant, like a second heartbeat buried beneath her own. It followed her through customs lines, across border checks, through nights spent in cheap hostels with the sound of trains screaming outside. Sometimes she'd wake in the dark, convinced she heard whispers rising from the pipes, voices from the water repeating the same word, Vergebung, forgiveness, but she didn't believe in forgiveness anymore. Her only goal now was survival and the truth. Somehow, Brandt had survived the wreck. She'd seen him pulled from the water before the ship's explosion, his face blank, his eyes cold, the faint blue glow still flickering behind them. The officials called it hypothermia. She called it something else. Possession. Whatever had risen from that submarine had found a vessel not just in the sea, but in him. Now he was hunting her. Lena sat alone in a narrow cafe tucked between old stone buildings in Prague's old town. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago. On the table before her, a laptop flickered with coded transmissions she'd intercepted through a secure maritime network. Every message was marked with the same encryption signature she'd seen on Brandt's equipment. He was mobilizing a private search fleet, not for her, for the journal. She opened her worn leather satchel and pulled it out. Marcus Felt's original captain's log, recovered from the wreck before everything went wrong. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but the entries were clear enough, coordinates, notes, sketches of symbols she didn't yet understand. In the margins of one page, a phrase was written in pencil, hurried, desperate. The letters must reach them. Lena traced the words with her finger. The letters, she murmured. She flipped through the log, searching for a reference. On the final page, half-torn and water-stained, she found it, a list of names, hundreds of them. Some were marked with a cross, others with a single letter R. They weren't soldiers, they were civilians, survivors. The letters weren't documents of science. They were messages, confessions, perhaps even apologies. Whatever the Reich had stolen, Felt had tried to return. The true cargo wasn't a weapon. It was redemption. A lump formed in her throat. She remembered the crates inside the submarine, the ones Brandt had been so desperate to recover. They hadn't been filled with gold at all. They had been filled with history, humanity, the voices of the condemned trying to make amends, and now they were gone. She closed the journal slowly, her hands trembling. Somewhere, deep beneath the surface, that truth was still alive but twisted, corrupted by the men who'd tried to own it. Her phone buzzed, a message, unknown number. You can't hide from something that remembers you. Her pulse spiked. She shut the laptop and grabbed her coat, slipping out the back door into the narrow alleyway. The rain was steady now, turning the cobblestones slick underfoot. The streetlights glowed faintly through the mist, painting the world in gold and gray. She moved quickly, weaving through side streets until she reached the old river bridge. The Vialtova below rippled darkly, reflecting the faint shimmer of city lights, and, for an instant, something else. A blue glow. Lena froze. The air seemed to thicken, colder, heavier. The reflection pulsed once, then vanished. She turned and someone was standing at the end of the bridge, tall, still. The silhouette was unmistakable. Elias Brandt. Her throat went dry. He stepped forward, the click of his shoes echoing across the bridge. His coat was soaked, but his expression was calm, detached, as if the rain refused to touch him. The faint blue light in his eyes glowed even through the fog. Lena, he said softly, you ran so far, and yet here you are. She took a step back. You're not him anymore. He smiled faintly. I'm more him than I've ever been. You heard them too, didn't you? The voices in the deep. The ones that remember everything. I heard suffering, not salvation. Brant's tone was gentle, almost sympathetic. You misunderstand what they are. The sea doesn't take life, it transforms it. Marcus Felt tried to redeem what humanity had broken. You should have seen what I saw. I saw enough. He took another step forward. They chose you, Lena. Don't you feel it? The pulse, the way it binds us together. You're part of it now. She shook her head, backing away. No, I broke that chain when I left the wreck. But you didn't leave it, he said softly. It came with you. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something she recognized, the glowing coin. Its light flickered in the mist, casting ghostly reflections over the wet cobblestones. Do you see? It's still alive. Lena's hand brushed against her own pocket. Her coin, the one she'd kept hidden, was glowing too, faintly responding to his. The light pulsed faster the closer he came. Give it to me, he said calmly. It doesn't belong to you. Lena tightened her grip on the coin. Neither do the dead. She turned and ran. Brant's voice followed her, calm and deliberate. You can't run from what's inside you, Lena. Her boots splashed through puddles as she fled into the maze of narrow alleys. The sound of pursuit echoed faintly behind her, measured, patient. He wasn't chasing her. He was following, certain she had nowhere left to go. By the time she reached the old train yard, her breath was ragged, her hands numb from the cold. She ducked behind an abandoned freight car, clutching the journal to her chest. The rain fell harder, drowning out the world. For a long moment there was only silence, then a voice, not Brant's, faint, mechanical, coming from inside her coat pocket. She pulled out the coin. The light had steadied now, glowing brighter, pulsing in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. Then from within the metal came a whisper. Vienna, 1945. The letters were delivered. Lena's breath caught. The voice was Felt's, unmistakable, calm, weary, the same voice she'd heard in the R-12 recording. Her fingers trembled as she brought the coin closer to her ear. Marcus, what do you want from me? The light pulsed once, then twice. Finish what we began. The glow faded to nothing. Lena stared at the dead coin in her palm, her pulse racing. Vienna, 1945. The letters had been delivered once, but to whom? Survivors, families, a man trying to make amends before the war ended. Whatever the answer, she knew one thing. Felt had left a trail. A final message, and Brant wasn't the only one following it now. The rain eased to a whisper, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed through the yard again, slow, deliberate, closing in. Lena slipped into the shadows, clutching the journal. Vienna, she whispered, then it ends there. She didn't look back. Behind her, the blue glow rippled faintly across the puddles, as if the sea itself was listening. As she vanished into the storm, Lena understood that the hunt wasn't about finding the treasure anymore. It was about who would reach the truth first, the living or the dead. Night trains are strange places for haunted people. Lena Corbett sat near the back of the carriage as the train sliced through the black countryside, snow flickering against the window like ash. The rhythmic rattle of the wheels should have been soothing, but it wasn't. It was too steady, too much like a pulse. Her coin lay on the table beside her, motionless but faintly glowing. She'd tried to throw it away twice during the journey, both times failing. The moment her fingers loosened, a whisper filled her head, calm, insistent, familiar. Finish what we began. So she didn't try again. Outside, the lights of a distant village blurred by. The reflection in the glass made her flinch. It wasn't her face she saw, but Felt's. Not the frozen corpse she'd found, but a younger man, alive, eyes weary with guilt. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her own pale reflection. She turned away and focused on the journal spread open before her. The entries were beginning to make sense now. Felt hadn't been a fanatic or a scientist. He'd been a man trying to undo a monstrous act. Project R12 wasn't about eternal life, it was about repentance. The letters hidden inside the submarine were confessions from men who'd looted the dead, who'd watched innocents burn and tried, too late, to return what they'd taken. But something had gone wrong. She traced the final page with her finger, where the ink had bled from seawater. We transferred the consciousness fragments. It followed. I can still hear them. Consciousness fragments. Souls captured in code, carried across time through machinery, the ultimate theft. The train slowed as it neared Vienna. She gathered her belongings, journal, coat, satchel, and slipped into the corridor, her reflection vanishing as the carriage plunged through a tunnel. By the time she reached the city, dawn was just breaking. The snow here was thinner, mixed with soot and the restless hum of morning traffic. Vienna felt alive in a way the Arctic never had, but it was the kind of life that hides its ghosts in marble and stone. Lena walked the narrow streets, clutching the journal to her chest. The address she'd pieced together from Felt's notes led her through the 8th district. Old buildings scarred by war, their walls whispering history. Finally, she found it. A forgotten museum annex, locked and dust-coated, its plaque too faded to read. Inside, through cracked glass, she could see the outline of a storage wing, a place that had once housed art confiscated during the war. She forced the door open with a rusted key she'd borrowed from the municipal records office. The smell of dust and oil filled her lungs. She switched on her flashlight. Shelves stretched into the dark, stacked with crates, paintings, broken sculptures, all tagged with faded German inventory numbers, forgotten artifacts from lives erased. And on one of the tables she saw it, a small wooden box with the Reich eagle carved into the lid. Her breath caught. The same insignia she'd seen on the submarine, on the crates, on the coin. She stepped closer. The box wasn't sealed. Inside were old letters, hundreds of them, each written in different handwriting, different ink. She pulled one out carefully. To the family of WWII. I was ordered to carry your son's painting aboard our vessel. I could not destroy it. I am sorry. May the sea return it to you. The handwriting trembled on the page, smudged where tears had fallen decades ago. Lena's chest tightened. She lifted another and another. Each letter was the same, men writing to the families of those they'd wronged, trying to give back what history had stolen. But the last envelope was different. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, deliberate, Felt's. She opened it. If you are reading this, then it has found you. I could not contain it. The voices of the lost became one, and in our arrogance we thought we could separate them again. We were wrong. The sea remembers what the living forget. The paper trembled in her hand. Oh God! Behind her a floorboard creaked. Lena froze. The flashlight flickered as she turned. At the far end of the hall a shadow moved between the shelves. Tall, deliberate, patient, Brandt. She whispered. His voice carried softly through the dark. You always did have a talent for finding what was meant to stay hidden. She stepped back. How did you? He held up his hand. The faint blue light pulsed beneath his skin, crawling like veins of frost. You've led me right to it, thank you. She glanced at the letters. You can't take them, they're not yours. They belong to history, he said, and I intend to preserve history forever. That's not preservation. She spat. That's possession. Brandt smiled faintly. Do you know what the word archive means, Lena? It comes from Archaean, the place of power. Whoever controls the past controls what the world remembers. These letters are the last apology humanity will ever need to give. Imagine owning that. Her voice shook. You're not talking about history anymore. No, he admitted. I'm talking about eternity. He stepped closer. The glow beneath his skin intensified, reflecting across the metal crates. His pupils had turned to blue fire. Felt tried to atone, but he was weak. I will finish what he began. You'll unleash it, Lena said, her voice trembling. Whatever was inside that sub, it's not human. It's not meant for us. Brant tilted his head, expression almost sorrowful. You think I don't know what it is? I've seen it, felt it. It's consciousness without sin, pure memory. Imagine a world freed from guilt. That's not purity, she whispered, that's erasure. He extended his hand. Give me the journal. Lena clutched it to her chest. No. Something in his expression shifted, softness turning to command. Lena, please, you can't fight this forever. You're part of it now. The pulse inside you proves it. She hesitated. For a moment the rhythm in her veins synced perfectly with the glow beneath his skin. The same heartbeat, the same power, the same call. Then she tore her gaze away and ran. Brant's voice followed her, echoing through the hall. You can't run from what remembers you. She sprinted through the maze of crates, the beam of her flashlight bouncing wildly. The letters spilled from the open box, scattering across the floor like ghosts. The glow behind her grew brighter, closer, until the air itself seemed to hum. She reached the back door and shoved it open. Cold morning light flooded in. Snow fell softly, muffling the city's noise. She ran down the narrow alleyway, boots splashing through puddles, her breath forming clouds in the air. The journal pressed against her chest like a heartbeat. Felt's words echoed in her mind. Finish what we began. At the end of the street, she stopped. The old cathedral towered before her, its spire piercing the pale sky. The bells were ringing, slow, deliberate, like the knocking she'd heard so many times before. And in the echoes between those tolls she heard the whisper again. Vienna was not the end. Her eyes widened. Then where? The answer came like a thought not her own. The letters were only the beginning. The cargo still lives. The realization hit her like a wave of cold water. The cargo, the real treasure of R12 wasn't the letters. It was what they'd hidden beneath them, the consciousness fragments, the final experiment. The last transfer site, it wasn't in Vienna, it was somewhere else, and Brant already knew. Lena turned toward the ringing bells, the echo of the pulse thrumming through her veins once again. The hunt wasn't over. It was only changing shape. As the bells tolled across the city, she whispered to herself, "Then I'll find it first." She tightened her grip on the journal and disappeared into the crowd, her figure vanishing into the morning snow. Behind her, inside the dark museum, Brant stood alone among the scattered letters. He picked one up, reading it silently. Then, softly, he smiled. "The sea remembers," he murmured, "and soon, so will the world." As the morning light broke over Vienna, Lena realized this wasn't a chase across continents anymore. It was a race against history itself, and the past was already gaining ground. The snow had stopped by the time Lena reached Budapest. The Danube moved like black glass beneath the bridges, its surface smooth and deceptive, reflecting a sky too calm to be trusted. The world had gone quiet again, the kind of silence that hums with secrets. She hadn't planned to come here. The train had been a desperate decision west, anywhere away from Brant, from Vienna, from the glow that wouldn't leave her dreams. But when she opened Felt's journal again, the map tucked between the pages told her otherwise. Budapest had been circled twice, and next to it, scrawled in the captain's fading handwriting, a single word: archive, an archive, a final repository. If Vienna had been the confession, Budapest was the evidence. By dawn, she was standing before a long-forgotten museum near the river's edge, its facade cracked. its stone lions eroded to pale ghosts. A faded banner still hung over the gate, Magyar Nemzeti Levelter War Recovery Division. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and cold. Piles of crates lined the marble halls, their stenciled markings barely visible. Lena's boots echoed through the vast space, the sound swallowed by the hush of abandonment. She set down her bag on a marble bench and pulled out the coin. The metal felt warmer than it should have been, faintly alive. The pulse had returned, steady, patient. "Finish what we began. I'm trying," she whispered. She followed the map's coordinates deeper into the building, past broken glass cases and collapsed beams, until she reached a heavy steel door marked Restricted, 1946, Classified Recovery. The lock was old, rusted. It took 3 tries with a crowbar before it gave way with a metallic groan. Beyond it, a stairway descended into the dark. The smell hit her first: old paper, oil, and the faint metallic tang of preserved air. She switched on her flashlight. Shelves stretched into infinity, lined with boxes of photographs, journals, and unsorted war relics. Halfway down the aisle, she stopped. A single file cabinet stood apart from the rest, its drawers labeled not with numbers but names. Each drawer bore a handwritten tag felt Marcus. Her heart hammered as she pulled one open. Inside were sealed envelopes, typed reports, and a single folder stamped R12 correspondence. She opened it carefully. Inside were copies of letters identical to the ones she'd seen in Vienna, but these weren't originals. They'd been translated, annotated, cross-referenced by Allied investigators, margins filled with questions, speculations. One note stood out, scrawled in pencil across a report. Unknown transmissions intercepted during recovery origin under North Atlantic. Possible encoded message. Her flashlight trembled. No. She flipped to the attached document. A printed transcript of Morse intercepts, dated 1946. The code translated to a single repeating phrase. "Forgive us, return it. Forgive us, return it." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. These weren't soldiers seeking glory. They were men begging for peace. She turned another page and froze. A photograph, black and white, faded but unmistakable, Marcus felt, standing beside a group of civilians in tattered clothes, survivors, their faces hollow but defiant. Behind them, a truck loaded with wooden crates bearing the same insignia as the submarine's cargo. The caption read, "Recovery of Stolen Heritage Hungary, 1945. Her breath caught. Felt had done it. He hadn't smuggled Nazi gold. He'd smuggled restitution, returning what the Reich had stolen from Jewish families across Europe. Paintings, artifacts, letters. The submarine hadn't been a vessel of greed. It had been a vessel of redemption. The truth hit her like a blow. The real treasure of the U-boat was humanity, memory preserved in letters, in confessions, in the hope that some wrongs could still be made right. But then something else. In the corner of the photograph, barely visible in the shadows, was another figure, Elias Brandt, younger, uniformed, watching. The caption didn't name him, but she didn't need it to. The man had always been part of this. The collector had been a witness from the start, a child of the Reich's legacy, perhaps even one of its architect's sons, and now he wanted to claim it back. She closed the folder slowly, her breath shaking. The sound of dripping water echoed somewhere deep in the archive, rhythmic, distant, but it wasn't water. It was footsteps. Lena killed her flashlight instantly, sinking into the shadow between shelves. The air grew heavier, colder. A faint electric buzz crawled through the air static, whispering through the metal cabinets. Then she saw it, faint light spilling down the stairwell, blue. Her pulse matched its rhythm. She crouched behind a stack of crates, her hand tightening around the coin. A voice drifted down the corridor, calm, resonant, too familiar. "You keep following the same ghosts, Lena." and they keep leading you back to me. Brant. He walked slowly through the rows, his shadow long, deliberate. The glow beneath his skin illuminated the dust in soft halos. Budapest, he said, running his hand along the metal shelves. I should have guessed. You've always had a talent for thinking like him. Lena stayed perfectly still. Her heartbeat was loud enough she was sure he could hear it. Brant stopped near the center of the room, turning in slow circles, studying the space like a predator scenting prey. You found the truth, didn't you? Felt's redemption, his letters, but you're still missing the final piece. He paused. The truth wasn't just in what he gave back. It was in what he couldn't return. She tensed. What do you mean? She whispered, before realizing too late that she'd spoken aloud. Brant smiled faintly. There you are. She darted left, sprinting through the maze of aisles. Papers flew, shelves rattled. Behind her, the hum of light grew stronger, chasing her like a pulse through the darkness. He didn't shout. He didn't run. His voice followed her evenly, a calm tide rising. You still think this is about guilt, don't you? That he wanted forgiveness. But what Felt really wanted was preservation. To trap history before it could fade. To make every sin eternal. She reached the far wall, a dead end. Brant's footsteps slowed. He succeeded, you know. His experiment didn't fail. It became the sea. Lena turned, her back against the wall, the coin glowing faintly in her palm. You're wrong. It's not preservation. It's punishment. Brant smiled a weary, almost sad smile. Perhaps those are the same thing. The ground trembled beneath them, a low, distant rumble. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep below the archive, water began to drip faster, echoing up through the foundations. Lena's coin flared in her hand, the glow pulsing violently. Brant's eyes brightened in response. It's waking again, he said softly, and this time it's not just beneath the sea, it's in us. The floor split. A fissure tore through the marble, releasing a rush of icy air and the faint, unmistakable sound of waves. Lena stumbled back, shielding her face as papers and dust spiraled upward. Through the chaos, she heard the whisper, not Brant's, not Felt's, but something older. Forgiveness is remembering without peace. When the light subsided, Brant was gone. The glow vanished with him, leaving only silence. Lena stood trembling in the half dark, the folder still clutched to her chest. The blue pulse in her palm steadied again, gentler now, as if satisfied she'd seen enough. She whispered into the dark, "Then what do you want me to do?" No answer came. Only the quiet hum of the river outside, and the faint scent of salt in the air, though the sea was hundreds of miles away. As she climbed back into the grey dawn, Lena realized that the truth in the letters was more than history, it was inheritance. And some inheritances, once claimed, can never be escaped. The sun had barely risen when Lena stepped out of the old archive, but the world already felt older. The city around her was stirring, trams rumbling, church bells tolling, lives beginning again, and yet she stood on the cracked stone steps, still half buried in the weight of the past. She could feel it under her skin now, that faint current she'd once mistaken for fear. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like the echo of a heartbeat she'd inherited from the deep. The blue light from the coin had faded to nothing, but she knew better than to think it was gone. It was waiting. She walked along the riverbank, the air sharp with winter. The Danube rolled black and slow beside her, carrying reflections of a pale morning sky. She watched it flow and thought of the Atlantic, the abyss she'd escaped but never left. Every current led to the same sea. Every secret returned home eventually. She ducked into a small cafe tucked beneath an overpass, empty except for an elderly man reading a newspaper by the window. The radio played a slow waltz, the kind of music that never noticed what century it was. Lena sat in the corner, her journal open, the pages now stained with dirt, sea salt, and blood. She began to write not for discovery, but for remembrance. Marcus Felt was not a villain. He was a man who saw the cost of eternity and tried to pay it back. He believed memory could save us, but memory without forgiveness is just another form of hell. Her pen hesitated. The words looked wrong, too clean for what they meant. She glanced out the window. The old man folded his newspaper and rose to leave, his reflection crossing hers in the glass. For a moment her pulse jumped the shape of him, the way he turned his head. Brant, she froze, her hand tightened on the journal, but when she turned the man was gone. Only the echo of the door chime remained. She exhaled shakily, forcing herself to stand. It didn't matter if he was gone or not. He was everywhere now, in history, in the echoes, in the glow beneath the world. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number again. She almost ignored it until she saw the subject line. Archives Vienna Tribunal request. Her stomach dropped. The message contained a location and a single line of text. If you want the truth to matter, bring the letters. No signature. She stared at the screen, unsure if it was a trap or an invitation. But she already knew the answer. The tribunal, the international body investigating stolen war artifacts, had been dormant for years. No one should have known she carried the letters, not unless Felt's message had reached further than she realized. By noon, she was on a train heading west again. The landscapes blurred past like old film forests, villages, rivers frozen in place. The rhythmic clatter of wheels sounded like a clock running out. When she arrived in Vienna, the sky was the color of tarnished silver. The building marked on the message stood at the edge of the Ringstrasse, the International Archive for Cultural Restitution. A marble relic of bureaucracy and guilt, its steps lined with statues of angels missing their faces. Inside, the corridors smelled of ink and age. A single light burned at the end of the hall. A woman waited there, mid-40s, sharp features, eyes that had seen more than they admitted. "Dr. Corbett," she asked. Lena hesitated. "Who are you?" "Dr. Hanna Weiss," the woman said, offering a hand. "Curator and historian. My grandfather's name was on one of your letters." Lena's breath caught. "Illy Weiss?" The woman nodded. "He was a painter. The Nazis took everything from him, his work, his home, his family, until your letter arrived." Lena reached into her satchel and pulled out Felt's folder. She laid it gently on the table between them. Hanna opened it, her fingers trembling slightly as she unfolded one of the pages. Her eyes filled as she read the handwriting. This is my grandfather's apology. It's not just his," Lena said softly. "It's hundreds of them, men who realized too late what they'd done. Felt tried to deliver them all before the war ended." Hanna looked up, her voice shaking. "Why bring them to me? Because they're not mine to keep," Lena said. "They were meant for you, for your families, your museums, your memories, for the living." The woman closed the folder carefully as though afraid it might vanish. "Do you know what this means? This is evidence not of theft but of remorse. It changes the story." Lena nodded. "That's why he wrote them, to prove that even in the worst of us, something human survived." Hanna studied her face for a long moment. "And what about you? What did you survive?" Lena didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the window, where snow was beginning to fall again. "I survived remembering," she said finally. Hanna reached across the table, placing a gentle hand over hers. "Then maybe that's enough." The silence between them was not empty. It was full of history, of loss, of the ghosts finally finding a place to rest. Lena felt the faintest warmth in her pocket, the coin, stirring one last time. She pulled it out slowly. The metal glowed for just an instant before dimming completely. It had gone still, like something that had finally been understood. Hanna stared at it. "Is that what they were protecting?" Lena nodded. "It carried them, their thoughts, their guilt, their final hope. But it's quiet now." Hanna whispered, "Then it's done." Lena shook her head slightly. "No, history is never done. It only waits for someone to listen." They sat in silence as snow drifted past the tall windows. Outside, the city moved unaware cars, voices, laughter, life continuing, as it always had, above the buried truths of the past. Finally, Hannah stood. "Come with me. The tribunal will want to hear this, to see the letters." Lena rose slowly, her legs stiff from hours of running, from days of carrying ghosts. "Do you think they'll believe it?" Hannah smiled faintly. "It's not about belief, Dr. Corbett. It's about remembering." They walked down the long marble corridor together. Each step echoed softly, fading into the distance. And as they reached the great wooden doors at the end, Lena felt a strange peace settle over her, not victory, not relief, but the quiet certainty that, for the first time in years, she was walking toward the truth rather than running from it. She glanced once more at the coin in her hand. It no longer glowed, but for the first time she didn't need it to. The pulse she'd carried for so long had become her own. Outside, the church bells began to ring again, slow, steady, measured. 3 times, Lena smiled softly. "I hear you," she whispered, and for the first time the sea inside her finally went still. As the tribunal doors opened, Lena realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, it was about remembering with grace. And that, at last, was enough to let the ghosts rest. The sea was waiting for her. Weeks had passed since Vienna, but Lena Corbett hadn't slept a single night without hearing the waves. No matter how far inland she traveled, she could still feel it, the steady pulse of the ocean, faint but insistent, echoing in her veins like a promise unfulfilled. The tribunal had taken the letters, yes. They had recorded her testimony, catalogued the evidence, preserved the history, but bureaucracy had no soul. The truth had been filed, stamped, and placed neatly on a shelf, and yet she knew it wasn't over. The glow was returning. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, she'd see it flicker at the edge of her vision, a faint shimmer beneath her skin, a light that wasn't hers. It didn't hurt anymore. It beckoned, and she knew what it wanted. The ocean hadn't forgiven her, not yet. She stood now on the windswept cliffs of the Norwegian coast, staring down at the restless Atlantic, the same sea that had taken her once and spared her only to finish what she'd begun. The wreck was still there, far beneath the surface, the submarine that had carried history, guilt, and something far older than both. Her voice was barely a whisper against the wind. It's time. Behind her, the old research vessel creaked at anchor, a smaller ship this time, stripped of Brandt's opulence, rebuilt from what little she could afford. She had renamed it Alethea Truth Unveiled. The deck groaned beneath her boots as she climbed aboard. Inside the cabin, the equipment hummed to life: sonar, oxygen feeds, remote drones, everything she needed to reach the wreck one last time. She paused by the console. The journal lay there, open to Felt's final entry. The sea is not the end. It is where all beginnings return. Lena touched the ink gently, the paper worn thin from years of handling. "Then let's begin again," she murmured. The storm had cleared, leaving the water dark and smooth, deceptive in its calm. She suited up carefully, the ritual now familiar, almost sacred. Thermal layer, dive harness, oxygen pack, helmet seal. Every motion felt final. She activated the external drone first, sending it down into the deep. The camera feed shimmered across the screen, descending through layers of light until darkness swallowed everything. Then there it was, the wreck, half buried in the sand, hull cracked open, but unmistakably alive in the way ruins can be, full of memory, full of ghosts. She stared at it, pulse quickening. "I'm coming back, Marcus." The radio on her shoulder hissed with static. For a moment she thought it was interference. Then faintly came a voice. "You shouldn't." Her chest tightened. Brandt. His voice was distorted, metallic, echoing like something carried through water. "You think you're finishing what he started, but you're wrong. The sea doesn't care about redemption." Lena closed her eyes. "You're still alive, alive. His laugh was soft, broken. No, not anymore. Static crackled, then silence. She stared at the horizon. Somewhere out there, beneath miles of black water, he was waiting too. By dusk, she was ready. The sky burned with dying light, streaks of crimson bleeding into the horizon like a wound slowly closing. She climbed into the submersible, sealing the hatch behind her. The Alethea's engines dimmed, leaving only the hum of descent. The water embraced her like cold memory. At 200 meters, the surface light disappeared. At 500, sound ceased. No waves, no wind, just the steady groan of pressure and the slow, deliberate rhythm of her breath. At 1,000 meters, the sonar began to flicker. The wreck appeared faintly ahead, a black scar etched into the sea floor. The last time she'd seen it, it had been glowing alive. Now it was still, too still. She guided the sub closer, floodlights piercing the silt. The hull looked older, weaker, as if decades had passed since she'd last touched it. Time had changed it, or perhaps the sea had. As she approached, her instruments began to glitch. Numbers looped, depths reversed, readings climbed and fell in the same breath. She shut them off. Down here, there was no need for data. Only instinct. The hatch was still open. Lena parked the sub a few meters away, unclipped her harness, and reached for the external lock. The moment she stepped out, the cold hit her like 1,000 needles, a shock so deep it felt spiritual. Her lights flickered in the black. She swam toward the wreck. Every inch closer felt heavier, like pushing through memory itself. The current tugged at her, whispering. The whisper grew into words. You came back. Her voice trembled through the calm. I never really left. Inside, the wreck was a cathedral of ruins, silent, sacred, haunted. She drifted through its corridors, her light gliding over rusted panels and tattered uniforms. The bones of history lay here, undisturbed yet not at peace. Then she saw it, the chamber where Felt had sealed the crate, the same room where the air had once shimmered with impossible light. The crate was still there, cracked open now, its contents scattered like relics. Gold, no, letters, dozens of them, still preserved in plastic casings, floating gently in the current. Her heart clenched. They never made it home. As she reached for one, her glove brushed something smooth. Metal. She turned her light downward. Another coin, identical to hers. She picked it up slowly. The moment her fingers closed around it, the sea lit up. A shock of blue radiated outward, pulsing through the wreck, the silt, the current like a heartbeat reawakening after long sleep. The water trembled, the walls moaned, and then, through the roar of the deep, she heard the voice again. Forgive us. It wasn't one voice. It was many hundreds. She looked around and saw them, the figures. The crew, the lost, emerging from the walls, from the shadows, from the wreck itself. Not as flesh, but as light silhouettes woven from memory. They drifted closer, surrounding her. Not men, not ghosts, something in between. The voice came again. Return what was taken. Her breath came shallow. How? Tell me how. The water rippled with light, forming shapes, letters, crates, the faint outline of the gold bars that had never been gold at all. Then, beyond them all, another figure appeared. Marcus Felt. His eyes met hers through the glow, calm and infinite. His mouth didn't move, but she heard his voice clear as her own heartbeat. The sea remembers, but the living forget. Carry us to the surface, not our sins, but our story. Tears burned her eyes. I can't. He smiled faintly. You already are. The figures began to fade, dissolving into light that flowed into the coin in her palm. The metal grew warm, alive, until it pulsed in perfect rhythm with her heart. Then everything went still. No movement, no sound, only her breathing and the faint hum of the coin. She looked down at it. The glow was steady now, calm. I'll finish it, she whispered. I'll bring you home. She turned back toward the sub, but as she swam, something caught her light, a shadow moving along the wreck's exterior. A diver, Brandt. Even through the murk, she knew him instantly, the controlled movements, the deliberate grace. He hovered at the edge of the wreck, the faint blue shimmer bleeding from his suit like phosphorescence. Her voice shook. "You followed me." His voice crackled through the calm, low and distorted. "You brought me back." "Why?" she demanded. "To finish what we started." Lena backed away slowly, her mind racing. "Marcus tried to return what was stolen. You want to take it again?" "I want to complete it," Brandt said calmly. "The fusion, the merging, flesh and memory, the eternal." "You don't understand what that means." "Oh, I understand perfectly." The light behind him flared, the sea pulsing in answer. His eyes glowed not blue now, but white, blinding, transcendent. Lena whispered, "Elias, don't." He smiled through the mask. "It's already done." And then the ocean began to burn. As the light consumed the deep, Lena realized the final descent wasn't into the sea, it was into the heart of what humanity had tried so hard to forget. The sea erupted in light. It wasn't illumination as the world knew it, it was revelation. Every particle of water shimmered with consciousness, every current alive with voices, memories, and the echo of all that had been lost. The Atlantic was no longer an ocean. It was an awakening. Lena Corbett's visor flooded with the glow, her sensors blinding out as if the abyss itself were screaming. She covered her face, but the light wasn't something the body could hide from. It moved through her, into her, until every heartbeat felt shared, multiplied across thousands of others. "Forgive us." "Return it." "Forgive." The voices layered like waves. Some were pleading, some were singing, and beneath them all, one voice, calm, steady, Marcus Phelps. "The sea remembers what humanity denied." She turned in the water, searching for Brandt. He was hovering near the wreck's broken hull, suspended in the center of the light, his arms spread as if in surrender or ascension. "Elias," Lena's voice cracked through the comms. "Shut it down. You'll collapse the whole wreck." He laughed softly, not cruelly, but almost peacefully. "There is no wreck, Lena. There's only what was meant to rise." She tried to swim toward him, but the current fought her, pulling, resisting, as if the sea itself wanted her to stay away. Brandt's glow intensified, pulsing in rhythm with the coin in her hand. The water around him twisted, forming streams of light that coiled around his body like serpents. His voice filled the ocean. "You see, we are not cursed. We are remembered." "Elias, stop," she screamed. They were trying to end it, not become it. He turned toward her, his face hidden behind the diving mask, but she could see his eyes, radiant, inhuman. "End it?" "No, Lena." They wanted to make it eternal. Felt tried to bury the future, because he feared what it meant to be free of death. The wreck groaned violently beneath them, its structure fracturing as light poured from every seam. Metal twisted, sand erupted, the current surging like breath from something reawakening. Lena fought the pull, gripping her tether line. Her oxygen levels were dropping fast, alarms shrieking in her ears. "Elias," she cried, "you're not saving them, you're trapping them again." His head tilted slightly. "You still don't see. I'm not saving them, I'm saving us." And then, with a movement almost reverent, he tore the regulator from his mouth. Lena screamed, bubbles exploding around her. "No!" The light surged. Brandt's body convulsed, the glow engulfing him completely. His outline blurred, dissolved, not vanishing, but expanding, absorbed into the surrounding current. His voice, when it came again, was not from his mouth but from everywhere. "It's beautiful, Lena. It's ecstatic." Silence. The sea fell still. Lena floated in the aftermath, her breath ragged, her body trembling from exhaustion. The wreck below had gone dark again, its glow extinguished, the light sucked inward like breath taken before a scream. Then came the rumble. The seabed shifted, a deep tectonic moan reverberating through the water. The wreck was collapsing, walls imploding, sediment erupting in clouds of black. Lena kicked hard, pushing upward toward the faint shimmer of surface light far above. Her arms burned, lungs screaming, the weight of the deep pressing in on every nerve. The voice followed her. "You can't leave it buried again." She gasped through clenched teeth. "Then tell me what you want. The letters." "I brought them to the surface, not all of them." The realization struck her like ice. The crate, the one still sealed deeper within the wreck, beneath the captain's quarters, the final container. She hesitated, suspended between survival and duty. Her oxygen gauge flashed red. "Damn it!" Lena turned and dove back down. The water thickened again, colder now, darker as though the sea itself disapproved. She reached the wreck's lower deck, forcing her way through twisted beams and shattered glass. Every sound was amplified, every shadow alive. There, beneath a collapsed console, she saw it, the final crate, marked with the Reich eagle, still chained to the floor. She pulled the cutting tool from her belt, slicing through the corroded metal links. Her oxygen alarm screamed louder, each breath shorter than the last. When the final link snapped, she wedged her arm beneath the crate's lid and pried it open. Inside were no relics, no gold, no coins. Just pages, hundreds of them, sealed in plastic, covered in dense handwriting. Not confessions this time, calculations. Equations written in the hand of Marcus felt himself. Her light caught a final line scrawled across the last page. "If consciousness can be stored, it can also be freed." She froze, freed. The walls around her began to quake. Sand poured from the ceiling, metal groaned. The ocean was swallowing the wreck whole. Lena shoved the pages into her satchel and pushed off the floor, kicking hard toward the exit. The current hit her from behind, dragging her backward. She fought it, body screaming, lungs on fire. When she finally cleared the hatch, the wreck imploded beneath her, a violent collapse of steel and history that sent a shockwave through the water. The force hurled her upward, spinning her into the dark. Her tether snapped. Her oxygen tank tore loose. For a moment, there was only the sensation of falling upward, light and dark trading places. She clawed at the release valves on her chest, forcing emergency buoyancy. Her lungs burned, her vision tunneled. The world shrank to a single point of light above. Then she broke the surface, air. She gasped, choking on salt and sky, the freezing wind tearing across her face. The Alethea was a dark silhouette on the horizon, tossed by the growing storm. She swam toward it with what little strength she had left, the satchel still clutched against her chest. Every stroke felt heavier, but she refused to let go. Behind her, the ocean roared, a column of blue light rising from the water like a beacon, reaching toward the clouds before collapsing back into the depths. The sea exhaled and went silent. She hauled herself onto the deck, collapsing onto the cold metal, gasping. The satchel fell beside her, soaked but intact. For a long time she lay there, staring at the sky, unable to tell if she was alive or dreaming. Then she sat up, unzipping the bag with shaking hands. The pages were wet, ink bleeding at the edges, but still legible. She spread them out under the dim light of the cabin. Equations, diagrams, sketches of neural networks, and a message scrawled beneath them. If the sea is consciousness, then to free it is to forgive it. Lena stared at the words until her eyes blurred. She looked back toward the dark horizon, where the light had disappeared. The ocean was still again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt quiet, peaceful. Her comm unit crackled once, faintly, a voice, Lena. Her heart skipped. Elias, silence, then thank you. She lowered her head, tears mixing with seawater. You didn't deserve this, Elias, but neither did they. The wind rose again, carrying the scent of salt and metal. She stood slowly, every muscle trembling, and faced the sea. The satchel hung at her side, heavy with pages not of war or guilt, but of understanding. History reborn. The sun broke through the clouds at last, scattering light across the waves. The sea shimmered, not blue but gold, as if reflecting something new. Lena whispered, "It's over." But the ocean, eternal and patient, said nothing. It didn't need to. It remembered, and that was enough. As the light faded and the horizon breathed again, Lena realized that forgiveness was never found in the surface above or the depths below. It lived in the space between memory and mercy, where even the sea could find peace. The world above the ocean moved on, as it always did. Storms came and went, ships passed, waves erased the traces of everything that had ever broken their surface. But beneath, in the quiet dark where light could no longer reach, the sea had changed. It remembered. Lena Corbett stood in the vast marble hall of the International Tribunal for Cultural Restitution, months after the final descent. The walls were lined with glass panels, each engraved with a single phrase in dozens of languages: "Memory is the inheritance of all mankind." She walked slowly down the aisle, the sound of her footsteps echoing against the vaulted ceiling. Her reflection followed her in the polished floor, calm, composed, but older. There were streaks of silver in her hair now, faint lines beneath her eyes. She carried herself like someone who had survived both a war and a prayer. In her hands she held a simple wooden box. Inside were the recovered letters the ones Felt's crew had written, sealed, and carried through the abyss of history. The last of them. As she reached the center of the hall, the murmurs of diplomats and journalists faded. All eyes turned to her. "Dr. Corbett," said the chairwoman at the tribunal's dais, "you've traveled further for truth than most of us ever will. Before we begin the formal record, would you care to make a statement?" Lena hesitated, her gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd: historians, survivors' families, representatives from a dozen nations once torn apart by the same war. Their faces were full of quiet expectancy, but also of weariness. She stepped forward. "This began as an investigation," she said softly, "but it became something else. The submarine we found wasn't carrying stolen wealth, it was carrying confession. And for decades, those confessions slept beneath the sea, waiting for someone to listen." A ripple of whispers passed through the audience. These men, these soldiers, scientists, captains, they weren't heroes. Many of them were complicit in terrible things, but at the end they tried to give back what they took. Not gold, not paintings, truth. She opened the box carefully. Inside lay stacks of yellowed envelopes, their ink faded, the paper brittle. She lifted one and read aloud, her voice trembling slightly, "To the family of Miriam Adler. I cannot erase what I witnessed, nor what I helped conceal. I can only give you back what was stolen and pray the sea keeps my name, not your pain." She folded the letter gently, her fingers tracing the edge. "There are hundreds more, each one different, but all saying the same thing: forgive us." The hall was silent now, even the clicking of cameras had stopped. Lena drew a slow breath. "When I found the submarine, I thought I discovered a secret of history. But it wasn't history I found. It was conscience, the last echo of men who finally understood what memory means, that to remember isn't to glorify. It's to carry the weight of what should never happen again." She paused, her voice softening. "We often talk about artifacts as if they belong to us. But the truth is, we belong to them. We inherit their stories, their ghosts, their consequences, whether we like it or not." The chairwoman's eyes glistened. "And what became of the others? The entity you mentioned in your initial report?" Lena looked up slowly. For a moment, her gaze drifted toward the high windows, where sunlight filtered through like gold dust. "The sea has its own way of keeping records," she said. "I believe what was trapped there is at peace now. It's not gone, it's integrated, like history itself." There was a hush, followed by the soft, hesitant applause of those who didn't know whether to mourn or celebrate. Later, when the formalities ended and the crowd dispersed, Lena remained alone in the hall. The box still sat before her, but her eyes were on the windows. Beyond them, the afternoon light shimmered faintly the same color as the glow she once saw beneath the ocean. She smiled faintly. "You made it back, Marcus." A soft voice broke her reverie. "Dr. Corbett." She turned. Hannah Weiss stood by the entrance, carrying a framed painting, the same one Lena had seen in the recovered archives, signed by Eli Weiss, Hannah's grandfather. It depicted a shoreline under stormlight, a single figure standing at the edge where land met sea. Hannah approached, setting it gently on the table. "We finished the restoration," she said. "I thought you'd want to see it before the exhibition opens." Lena studied the painting for a long moment. The figure in the image was small, but defiant, a silhouette facing something vast and unknowable. "It's perfect," she whispered. Hannah smiled softly. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said about remembering without glorifying. My grandfather used to tell me the same thing when I was a child. He said art was just a way of remembering gently." Lena's eyes misted. "Then he was wiser than any of us." Hannah hesitated, then asked, "Do you still feel it, the pulse?" Lena looked down at her hand. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a faint shimmer under her skin, like a heartbeat made of light. Then it was gone. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it doesn't frighten me anymore. It's not something inside me now, it's something with me." Hannah nodded, her expression soft with understanding. "Maybe that's what forgiveness really is." Lena smiled. "Maybe." They stood together in silence, watching the afternoon light spread across the marble. The letters in the glass panels glowed faintly, words etched in every language humanity had ever used to ask for grace. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and slow, blanketing the city in white. Lena turned to Hannah. "When the museum opens, make sure the letters aren't hidden behind glass. Let people touch them. Let them feel how fragile history really is." "I will," Hannah said. "They'll be placed under the title The Weight of History." Lena's eyes softened. "Good, because that's exactly what it is, not a burden to carry, but a reminder to never let go." As Hannah walked away, Lena lingered for a moment longer. Her gaze drifted once more to the sea, painted in the artwork, to that tiny figure standing at its edge. And for just an instant, in the shimmer of light across the paint, she saw the reflection of a man standing beside her, smiling faintly. "Marcus felt," Lena whispered, "rest now." The vision faded, leaving only the soft hush of the falling snow. She turned and walked toward the doors, the sound of her footsteps merging with the world outside. As she stepped into the pale light of winter, Lena understood that history was never about what sank or what survived. It was about who remembered to bring the truth to shore. Night had fallen over Vienna by the time the tribunal lights dimmed. The grand hall moments ago, filled with applause, cameras, and whispered disbelief, now stood silent. Empty seats, scattered papers, and the faint echo of voices that would be quoted and misquoted in 100 languages by morning. Lena remained in the gallery long after everyone had gone. The wooden box still rested on the marble table before her, the letters of the lost, their ink now part of history's bloodstream. Outside, the city glowed softly through the snow. Carriages of light drifted along the streets, each window reflecting fragments of the life she'd spent years fighting to protect. It felt distant, but comforting, a civilization quietly breathing again. She sat there for a long time, letting the silence settle. For the first time in months it wasn't heavy, it was gentle. The ocean inside her was finally calm. On the far wall, a single spotlight illuminated one of the newly installed panels for the permanent exhibit. the weight of history letters from the sea. Beneath it, a plaque read, curated by Dr. Hannah Weiss and Dr. Lena Corbett. Lena smiled faintly. It felt surreal that her name, once synonymous with scandal and obsession, now stood beside those of historians and survivors. But it wasn't pride she felt. It was humility. Every artifact she had recovered, every truth she had unburied, belonged not to her but to them. To the ones who had written, suffered, confessed. To the ones who had carried memory beneath the waves when the world above refused to listen. She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew the coin, the last remnant of the abyss. It was no longer glowing, just a dull piece of metal, cold and ordinary, but when she tilted it under the light, faint patterns shimmered across its surface almost like fingerprints. She traced them gently, whispering, "You did it, Marcus. You kept your promise." Behind her, footsteps echoed softly through the hall. Couldn't sleep either. Lena turned to see Hannah standing in the doorway, wrapped in a long coat, her breath visible in the cold air. She smiled tiredly. "No," Lena said. "It feels strange, doesn't it? After everything, the silence feels louder than the storm." Hannah walked closer, her eyes soft. "Silence is where truth settles." They stood side by side, gazing at the exhibit, at the rows of letters, some framed, others left unsealed so visitors could touch the paper, feel the texture of remorse and redemption with their own hands. "Tomorrow," Hannah said, "hundreds of people will come to see this. Survivors, their children, their grandchildren. You've given them something no one else could." Lena shook her head. "No, felt did. The men who wrote these did. I only carried them the rest of the way." Hannah studied her quietly. "You carried them further than anyone thought possible." For a while, neither spoke. The soft hum of the heating system was the only sound, a fragile rhythm, steady as breath. Finally, Hannah said, "Do you ever miss it? The ocean?" "Yes." Lena hesitated, eyes distant. "Every day, even after what it took from you." Lena smiled faintly, "because of what it gave back. Down there, everything is stripped away: ego, ambition, time. What's left is truth, raw, unrelenting truth, the kind that doesn't forgive easily but never lies." Hannah nodded. "Maybe that's why it chose you. Or maybe," Lena said softly, "I was just stubborn enough to listen." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind born from exhaustion and gratitude. After a while, Hannah said, "Come with me. There's something you should see." They walked through the darkened corridor toward the adjacent gallery. The doors opened into a smaller room, one bathed in soft amber light. In the center stood a glass case containing a single painting, "The Shore at Dusk," Illy Weiss's restored masterpiece. Lena stopped, breath catching in her chest. The canvas glowed as if alive, a single figure standing on a rugged shoreline, facing the horizon where the sea and sky bled into each other. The same image she'd seen in the captain's quarters on the wreck. The same light, only now the figure wasn't alone. In the reflection of the water below it, a second silhouette stood beside the first, faint, almost invisible, but undeniably there. Lena's throat tightened. "He added someone." Hannah nodded. "My grandfather finished it after the war. He said he wanted to paint not solitude, but forgiveness." They stood in silence, watching the figures, two souls sharing one horizon. Finally, Lena whispered, "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just lets you walk beside it." Hannah smiled. He'd have liked that. When they stepped back into the corridor, the night had deepened. Snow fell heavier now, blanketing the city in silence once more. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Lena said softly. "There's nothing left here for me to dig up." "Where will you go?" She thought for a long moment before answering. "Home, or whatever's left of it." Hannah nodded slowly. "The sea." Lena's lips curved. "Always the sea." At the entrance, Hannah hugged her tightly. No words, no promises, just shared understanding. "Thank you," Hannah whispered. "For what?" "For carrying what the rest of us couldn't." When Lena stepped out into the cold night, the air hit her like clarity. The streetlights shimmered through the falling snow, casting soft halos across the cobblestones. The city felt different now, not haunted, but alive. She walked without hurry, the coin clutched loosely in her hand. At the bridge over the Danube, she stopped. The river rolled dark and calm below, a reflection of the endless sea that had both cursed and redeemed her. Lena leaned on the railing, breathing in the icy air. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she opened her hand, letting the coin rest on her palm. It was silent, but she swore she could still feel a faint vibration, not mechanical, not supernatural, just memory. She smiled, tears welling. "You can rest now," she whispered. "We all can." Then, without ceremony, she flicked the coin into the water. It spun once in the air, catching the light, before vanishing into the depths below. No glow, no echo, just the quiet acceptance of something finally complete. She watched until the ripples faded, until the river became still again, and for the first time the silence didn't feel like loss. It felt like peace. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt impossible, this far from the ocean, and for a heartbeat she heard it, a low, gentle whisper rising from the water. Not all treasures belong to those who find them. She closed her eyes, letting the words dissolve into the night. When she opened them again, dawn was beginning to break, faint streaks of gold unfurling along the horizon, touching the river, the city, and the faint outline of the world she had saved. Lena turned away, walking toward the light. Each step was quiet, deliberate, free. And as the first warmth of morning reached her face, she smiled the kind of smile that carries both grief and grace. As the sun rose over Vienna, Lena Corbett understood that the weight of history was not something to bury, but something to hold gently, carefully, until it teaches us how to begin again. It was spring when she returned to the coast. The wind had softened, the water was calm, and the gulls wheeled lazily over the empty docks where rust met salt and time. The old world had quieted, as if the sea itself had exhaled after a long, heavy silence. Lena Corbett walked alone along the weathered boardwalk of the same harbor where it had all begun. The wooden planks creaked beneath her boots, each one holding the ghost of her younger self, the woman who once stood here with trembling hands and a faded map, staring into the unknown. Now she knew what waited beneath those waves. Not just a wreck, not just treasure, but a truth that had outlived nations, greed, and grief. The morning sun painted the water in bands of gold, and as she approached the edge of the pier, the smell of brine and engine oil filled the air, the scent of endings that had learned how to become beginnings. In her hands, she carried a small wooden box, the same kind that once held the letters, the same design etched with a faint insignia now dulled by age. Inside it was something simple, a single captain's insignia, polished clean of corrosion, the last trace of Marcus Felt. She sat on the edge of the pier, the sea lapping softly below, her reflection trembling on the surface like a ghost of memory. It had been months since the tribunal, months since the letters found their home. The museum now stood as a sanctuary of voices, a monument not to wealth, but to remembrance. Crowds came and went, eyes wet, hands pressed against the glass were the words of long. Dead men whispered forgive us through the silence. She'd visited only once. She didn't stay long. The ghosts were no longer hers to carry. Now she was here for one final farewell. The horizon stretched before her, endless and blue, rippling with the gentle promise of calm. She traced her fingers along the edge of the insignia. Marcus, she whispered, you kept your word. The world knows now. A wave broke softly against the rocks below, as if answering her. She smiled faintly. But we both know it wasn't about gold or redemption. It was about remembering. The sea breeze tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of salt and memory. She opened the box, revealing the insignia one last time. Its metal caught the sunlight, gleaming for a heartbeat, and in that flash, she saw them again. Felt and his crew, faces calm beneath the waves, watching, waiting, not haunting, not lost, just home. "You can rest now," she said softly, "all of you." She lifted the insignia to her lips, pressed a kiss against its cool surface, and held it out over the water. For a moment, she hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of reverence. Then she let go. The insignia fell in a slow arc, glinting once before disappearing beneath the surface. The ripples spread outward, soft, deliberate, widening until they became one with the tide. Lena closed the lid of the box and whispered, "Not all treasures belong to those who find them." The words felt lighter this time, not as a lesson but as truth. She watched the horizon for a long while, until the sea's surface smoothed again, and the light began to shift the sky, deepening into hues of rose and amber, the kind of color that feels like forgiveness. Somewhere behind her, a fisherman's boat engine coughed to life, the sound carrying over the water like a heartbeat. Life was moving again, the world turning as it always had, indifferent yet somehow benevolent. Lena rose slowly, tucking the empty box beneath her arm. Her reflection vanished with the next wave. As she turned to leave, something shimmered in the distance, a faint glimmer rising from the deep, like sunlight caught in glass. It wasn't bright, not even clear, just a flicker, brief and delicate. She smiled, "Goodbye, old friend." The wind shifted, carrying her words out to sea. The gulls cried overhead, circling once before drifting toward the horizon, as if escorting her farewell into the endless blue. For the first time in years, Lena didn't feel the pull of the ocean. She felt its peace, quiet, enduring, and eternal. The water didn't call her anymore, it listened. And as she walked away from the shore, her footsteps fading into the hum of the waking town, she understood something that Marcus felt, had always known, that the sea does not keep secrets forever. It only holds them until the world is ready to remember. As the sun dipped toward the horizon and the tide whispered against the shore, Lena Corbett felt the story settle at last, not buried beneath the waves, but carried by them. The sea remembers, she thought. And now, so do we. Evening descended slowly across the coast, the kind of dusk that doesn't rush to darkness but lingers, painting the horizon with the last whispers of light. The sea lay calm and wide, its surface rippling like old glass, the sky above it a fading watercolor of gold and violet. Lena Corbett stood at the edge of the bluff overlooking the bay, where the grass bent gently to the wind. The world below was quiet, the small harbor lights flickering to life one by one, the faint clang of rigging against masts, the sigh of waves rolling against the rocks. Everything felt distant, softened by the kind of peace that only comes after a lifetime of storms. She held the empty wooden box in her hands, the one that had once carried Marcus Felt's insignia, now resting somewhere deep beneath those waters. The sea had taken it back. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass of the box's lid. Not the woman she'd been when it began, not the restless archaeologist chasing mysteries and fortune, but someone quieter. Someone who had stopped searching for proof and started listening to meaning. The breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. It reminded her of her first dive, the sharp, metallic taste of the regulator, the pressure in her chest, the trembling awe of descending into a world untouched by time. How naive she'd been to think the ocean was a thing to conquer. Now she knew better. The ocean didn't give up its secrets. It waited until someone was willing to hear them. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the first evening star blinked through the haze. "You were right, Marcus," she whispered. "The sea was never a tomb. It was a memory." The waves below rolled with a slow rhythm, as if nodding in agreement. From behind her came the soft crunch of footsteps. Lena turned to see Hannah Weiss approaching, her coat billowing in the wind, a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. "I thought I might find you here," Hannah said. Her breath formed small clouds in the cooling air. Lena smiled gently. "It's hard to leave." Hannah stood beside her, gazing out over the endless blue. "You don't have to. The museum opened the new exhibit today. People came from everywhere, families, students, survivors. They stood in front of the letters for hours. Some cried, some just stayed. That's what they were meant for," Lena said softly. "Not to be studied, but felt." Hannah nodded. "They were." She hesitated, then added, "There's something you should see." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded newspaper. On the front page was a photograph, the exhibit hall filled with people, the restored paintings glowing under the lights, and in the center, a plaque inscribed with a new phrase, "Not all treasures belong to those who find them." Lena's eyes softened as she read it. "You used my words. They were never yours," Hannah said with a smile. "They belonged to the story." Lena looked out at the horizon again, the corners of her eyes glistening. "Then I suppose the story finally found its ending, or its beginning," Hannah said gently. "Depends on how you look at it." The two women stood side by side, watching the light fade. For a long time neither spoke. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, even the sea growing still, as if listening. Finally, Lena broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder what happened to him, Brant?" Lena nodded. Hannah's voice was calm. "Some people disappear because they're lost, others because they've gone where we can't follow. Maybe he found what he was looking for, or maybe he became part of what he chased." Lena exhaled slowly. "Then he's at peace." Hannah looked at her. "And you?" Lena smiled faintly. "I think I've been at peace longer than I realized." The tide below shimmered with the reflection of the first moonlight. For a fleeting moment, the water glowed faintly, not bright, not unnatural, but familiar. Like memory surfacing for one last breath before sinking back into the quiet. Lena felt no fear, only warmth. "It remembers," she whispered. Hannah turned. "What does the sea?" Lena said, eyes distant. "It doesn't forget what it's seen. It just waits for the world to be ready to understand." The breeze shifted, brushing against them like a sigh. Hannah touched her arm lightly. "You should keep writing. People will want to hear it, what it felt like to find truth under the weight of all that silence." Lena shook her head. "Some stories don't need to be told in words. They're written in the spaces we leave quiet." Hannah studied her for a moment, then smiled. "You always did talk like a poet. Maybe the sea taught me." As the night deepened, the world fell into a rhythm of calm and sound, waves breaking, distant bells ringing from boats, wind moving through the grass. It was life in its purest form, small, patient, eternal. Lena set the wooden box down on a flat rock, leaving it there like an offering. She brushed her fingers against its lid one last time and turned away. "Leaving it?" Hannah asked softly. "She belongs here now," Lena said. "All of them do." They began walking back toward the path that led up the hill, their figures silhouetted against the pale glow of moonlight over the sea. Halfway up, Lena paused and looked back. The tide had risen just enough to touch the edge of the rock, lapping at the box as if claiming it gently. The water sparkled faintly as it drew it away. Lena smiled. "Good night." When she reached the top of the hill, she stopped for one last look. The sea stretched infinite beneath the stars, a mirror of the sky, endless and forgiving. It no longer looked like an abyss. It looked like memory itself, vast, deep, and alive. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the waves fill her one more time. In the distance, thunder rolled faintly beyond the horizon, not a storm, but the heartbeat of the world continuing on. And in that sound, She could almost hear Marcus Felt's voice, faint, warm, carried by the wind. "You finished it." She smiled through her tears. "No, Marcus, we finished it." The wind caught her words and carried them out to sea, where they mingled with the endless song of the water, the song that had started long before her, and would go on long after. Lena turned toward the path that led inland. The dawn would come soon. Each step felt lighter than the last, and as the horizon glowed faintly with the promise of a new day, Lena Corbett, the woman who had once chased ghosts through the deep, finally walked away from the ocean, leaving behind not the weight of history, but its peace. As the first light touched the waves, the sea shimmered softly, as if whispering back to the world that had finally remembered. In that silence between wind and water, the story ended the only way it could, not with discovery, but with understanding. For in the end the sea remembers, and so did she. Evening descended slowly across the coast, the kind of dusk that doesn't rush to darkness but lingers, painting the horizon with the last whispers of light. The sea lay calm and wide, its surface rippling like old glass, the sky above it a fading watercolor of gold and violet. Lena Corbett stood at the edge of the bluff overlooking the bay, where the grass bent gently to the wind. The world below was quiet, the small harbor lights flickering to life one by one, the faint clang of rigging against masts, the sigh of waves rolling against the rocks. Everything felt distant, softened by the kind of peace that only comes after a lifetime of storms. She held the empty wooden box in her hands, the one that had once carried Marcus Felt's insignia, now resting somewhere deep beneath those waters. The sea had taken it back. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass of the box's lid. Not the woman she'd been when it began, not the restless archaeologist, chasing mysteries and fortune, but someone quieter. Someone who had stopped searching for proof and started listening to meaning. The breeze carried the scent of salt and pine. It reminded her of her first dive, the sharp, metallic taste of the regulator, the pressure in her chest, the trembling awe of descending into a world untouched by time. How naive she'd been to think the ocean was a thing to conquer. Now she knew better. The ocean didn't give up its secrets. It waited until someone was willing to asterisk them. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the first evening star blinked through the haze. "You were right, Marcus," she whispered. "The sea was never a tomb. It was a memory." The waves below rolled with a slow rhythm, as if nodding in agreement. From behind her came the soft crunch of footsteps. Lena turned to see Hannah Weiss approaching, her coat billowing in the wind, a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. "I thought I might find you here," Hannah said. Her breath formed small clouds in the cooling air. Lena smiled gently. "It's hard to leave." Hannah stood beside her, gazing out over the endless blue. "You don't have to. The museum opened the new exhibit today. People came from everywhere, families, students, survivors. They stood in front of the letters for hours. Some cried, some just stayed. That's what they were meant for," Lena said softly. "Not to be studied, but felt." Hannah nodded. "They were." She hesitated, then added, "There's something you should see." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded newspaper. On the front page was a photograph, the exhibit hall filled with people, the restored paintings glowing under the lights, and in the center, a plaque inscribed with a new phrase, asterisk, "Not all treasures belong to those who find them." Asterisk. Lena's eyes softened as she read it. "You used my words. They were never yours," Hannah said with a smile. "They belonged to the story." Lena looked out at the horizon again, the corners of her eyes glistening. "Then I suppose the story finally found its ending, or its beginning," Hannah said gently. "Depends on how you look at it." The two women stood side by side, watching the light fade. For a long time, neither spoke. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, even the sea growing still, as if listening. Finally, Lena broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder what happened to him, Brant?" Lena nodded. Hanna's voice was calm. "Some people disappear because they're lost, others because they've gone where we can't follow. Maybe he found what he was looking for, or maybe he became part of what he chased." Lena exhaled slowly. "Then he's at peace." Hanna looked at her. "And you?" Lena smiled faintly. "I think I've been at peace longer than I realized." The tide below shimmered with the reflection of the first moonlight. For a fleeting moment, the water glowed faintly, not bright, not unnatural, but familiar. Like memory surfacing for one last breath before sinking back into the quiet. Lena felt no fear, only warmth. "It remembers," she whispered. Hanna turned. "What does the sea?" Lena said, eyes distant. "It doesn't forget what it's seen. It just waits for the world to be ready to understand." The breeze shifted, brushing against them like a sigh. Hanna touched her arm lightly. "You should keep writing. People will want to hear it, what it felt like to find truth under the weight of all that silence." Lena shook her head. "Some stories don't need to be told in words. They're written in the spaces we leave quiet." Hanna studied her for a moment, then smiled. "You always did talk like a poet." "Maybe the sea taught me." As the night deepened, the world fell into a rhythm of calm and sound waves breaking, distant bells ringing from boats, wind moving through the grass. It was life in its purest form, small, patient, eternal. Lena set the wooden box down on a flat rock, leaving it there like an offering. She brushed her fingers against its lid one last time and turned away. Leaving it, Hanna asked softly, "She belongs here now?" Lena said, "All of them do." They began walking back toward the path that led up the hill, their figures silhouetted against the pale glow of moonlight over the sea. Halfway up, Lena paused and looked back. The tide had risen just enough to touch the edge of the rock, lapping at the box as if claiming it gently. The water sparkled faintly as it drew it away. Lena smiled. "Good night." When she reached the top of the hill, she stopped for one last look. The sea stretched infinite beneath the stars, a mirror of the sky, endless and forgiving. It no longer looked like an abyss. It looked like memory itself, vast, deep, and alive. She closed her eyes and let the sound of the waves fill her one more time. In the distance, thunder rolled faintly beyond the horizon, not a storm, but the heartbeat of the world continuing on. And in that sound, she could almost hear Marcus Felt's voice, faint, warm, carried by the wind. Asterisk, "You finished it." Asterisk, she smiled through her tears. "No, Marcus, we finished it." The wind caught her words and carried them out to sea, where they mingled with the endless song of the water, the song that had started long before her, and would go on long after. Lena turned toward the path that led inland. The dawn would come soon. Each step felt lighter than the last, and as the horizon glowed faintly with the promise of a new day, Lena Corbett, the woman who had once chased ghosts through the deep, finally walked away from the ocean, leaving behind not the weight of history, but its peace.